I am the Democratic Party right now.
Biden's elected president, they're going to keep him in the White House residence, and Kamala Harris is going to run the show.
Joe Biden should probably be, and I think will win the election.
Donald Trump is not a good candidate. He doesn't have the nation's best interests at heart.
People are anxious. People on all sides of the political spectrum are anxious.
The national election really affects the world more than it affects our country.
On November 3rd, we must finish the job and drain the rest of the swamp.
Tweeting at the television doesn't fix things.
We win Florida, we win the whole thing, you know that, right?
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, we will make America great again.
We can do this. There's nothing we cannot do.
Good morning. It's been a long night for both Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but the results haven't gone as the polls suggested. This morning we'll be dissecting all of the events throughout the night and also revealing more results as they come in. Alongside the serious information, we also have a light-hearted studio to lighten the mood.
Hello, I'm Hannah. Hi, I'm Catherine. And we're going to be bringing you the more light-hearted side of the US.
It's only come out the left channel, but fuck it.
We're going to be playing Trick or Tweet, Donald's Top Trump.
This US election has been called one of the most divisive campaigns in history, and tonight has certainly showed that. It's very close between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So let's take a look at the results so far, Alex.
They are. I didn't think these would be results this time today when I was thinking about like a week ago. Think about it, the poll said Joe Biden was 10 points ahead.
Yes.
This is not 10 points ahead.
No.
Far from it. So Joe Biden is currently on 238, as you can see at the bottom of the screens. Donald Trump is on 213. I think we've still got Nevada to call. Hawaii has been called for Biden, so we're probably waiting on another 6 electoral votes for Joe Biden. That would take him up to 244. But the magic number, 270.
Of course.
So we're kind of looking at the states that will make up that kind of route to 270. So we're kind of looking at Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The issue with this is, as you've probably seen from Donald Trump's statement this morning, the way they work is they do the mail-in ballots towards the end of the counting. Now, a lot of these mail-in ballots are going to go to the Democratic Party with Joe Biden. That's what all the data is saying, all the polls. But Donald Trump made the statement today and said, let's stop counting. And it's basically going to ignore a lot of Biden's votes. So we are probably going to look at, as we go on through today, possibly into tomorrow, a massive surge of Biden votes into these seats. The question is, will it be enough for those states to go blue?
Of course, and like you said, there has been a high turnout of in-mail voting this year, breaking all records, where 100 million votes have been casted early. And like you said, more Democratic supporters do vote via mail, so perhaps things could turn around, but maybe all of the Donald Trump votes have already come out. So let's have a look at the long queues that people have had to wait for this election as well. A lot of people have been voting this year. People want to have their voice heard. But there's also a lot of anxiety for people as well. There have been shops that have been boarded up, people making preparations in case there are protests and social unrest. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, it's not a shock. Well, you saw it like a few days ago. You see, I don't want to specifically target Republican voters or Trump voters, but you can see, you know, there was that footage of a Biden bus being bombarded by Donald Trump supporters, and, you know, this can get violent. Politics is a very emotional issue, and especially when something so divisive as this, you know, and it relates to the COVID-19, which we know is very split in the US as well. You know, Donald Trump has gone onto this messaging where he basically said mail-in ballots are fraudulent. That is false. That's been called for by many people. But it sets up the narrative for this to go into the courts, which wouldn't be the first time it's gone to the courts. Florida 2000 was obviously decided in the Supreme Court, but that was one state. That isn't the 3-4 states we're looking at right now. So it could be not a rush to electoral college vote. It could be a rush to see who can get the most lawyers into the states to decide the election.
Of course, and this isn't new information. I mean, Donald Trump, like you said, has suggested kind of for a couple of months ago that he was going to get the courts involved. And about an hour ago, he did release a statement where he said that a great fraud has been committed on the US public and that we're going to the Supreme Court and we're going to win this. And in my opinion, we already have. Now, Donald Trump did claim that he has won the US elections, but of course, that is not true. He might win, but it's not actually been called that he has won as of yet. No. And he also, in that statement, went through a list of states that he said he's already won. And now, as we know, these are key battleground states for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden, but Trump hasn't actually won them yet. He is in the lead for most of them. So should we have a look at the states that he's in the lead for?
Sure. So currently Pennsylvania, which he won last year. So he won a lot of these kind of, it's mostly the Rust Belt. So these are the states that Hillary Clinton neglected in 2016 and Trump took. These are places where they've got low economic activity. So the message of Donald Trump saying we're going to bring jobs back to America, all of this kind of stuff was very motivational to the people living there. Pennsylvania is also the birthplace of Joe Biden himself. He was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, home of Joe Biden and the American office. But yeah, so it's going to be very contentious about, you know, Pennsylvania has this big issue that Donald Trump has personally took effect to. He basically, if you send a mail-in ballot in Pennsylvania, it can be counted from yesterday. So, for example, if you put a letter in the US Postal Service, stamp it with the date on it. If it is marked for yesterday, 3rd of November, it could be put in, be counted up to next week, which is probably where Donald Trump has a bit of an issue with. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ruled that's fine, but again, this is going to be dragged into the courts. It's just so unprecedented. That's the only word I can say.
And that is one of the world's most favourite terms at the moment with coronavirus. Just have to put that one out there. Now, Pennsylvania is a key state for Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And Trump won Pennsylvania by less than 1% in 2016. But Biden is very confident that he will win the state. So when the results come out, that'll be very interesting to see what actually happens. And like we said, in-mail voting, this is a big problem this year because of the high popularity of having email voting due to COVID. I mean, are we expecting these swing states to become Biden's territory?
I honestly don't know. I'd love to have a crystal ball and obviously see all the data that everyone else has. But both parties are quite confident that they're going to win it. Obviously, Donald Trump was a bit more confident in his statement today, a bit overconfident, but Joe Biden's like, look at Georgia. He was kind of hinting that he does have a foothold in these seats. It's just.
But Georgia hasn't been called yet.
Georgia hasn't been called. Obviously, this is a normal Republican state. It did go Democrat from about 1868 all the way to 1960. But from the Civil Rights Act, they were kind of like down the South. They were kind of the conservative Democrats, so socially conservative but Democrat in terms of their fiscal policy. But for then, it's been solid Republican. The only time they really vote for Democrat is if it comes from the southern states, like Jimmy Carter, for example. So if it does go Biden, that'd be a shock. But again, it is a part of the changing landscape of America. Texas nearly went blue at one point. We all thought it would.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's a much more reduced, point lead that Donald Trump has. It's just, we are kind of experiencing the changes that will happen for the next election.
And another state as well that Biden has most recently won is Arizona, which is also a key battleground state in the US elections. And now this state has also been flipped by the Democrats. So there is potential that states will change who they're voting for. And Donald Trump has been definitely a very controversial president for America. He's had to deal with a turn with coronavirus, the economy. There's also been a lot of social unrest in America even before the election with Black Lives Matter protests as well. How do you think he's actually dealt with the events that have happened so far? And do we think that these impacts of Black Lives Matter and just the social unrest in America so far will have caused him to lose votes?
So I'll say that I won't do Black Lives Matter in Arizona because it's actually a massive. So basically, Arizona used to be the state of Senator John McCain. He died a few years ago. He was a Republican only in 2008, but John McCain did not agree with Trump at all, and so Arizona was John McCain's state, and obviously he's no longer senator. He died in office. So between this election and now, John McCain's family have come out in support of Biden. is a very unpopular figure, but his base are very passionate.
Yes, and the states that he does win mean a lot in the electoral college voting system. Like you mentioned there, in 2016, Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, but because of the electoral college voting system, she didn't actually win the election. She lost to Donald Trump. Now, like we said earlier, a seed has been planted in the fact that this election could be rigged, and it's cast doubt on lots of people's mindsets towards this election. Trump also said that winning is easy, losing is never easy for him. And I think that really foreshadowed the events that have unfolded throughout tonight.
Oh, he said he would claim victory early. And then what he's done?
Yeah.
He's claimed victory early. Extremely early. Like, so when I was watching this morning, I was watching BBC, I flipped into our TV, it was no Donald Trump. Joe Pierce was laying into him. It is just a widespread condemnation. I haven't seen what any of the American experts are saying, but even Donald Trump has come against his beloved Fox News because they called Arizona for Joe Biden. And he was like, oh, there's still so many votes to go. And it's just like, Donald Trump is putting up a fight to stay in the White House. And, there's a point where you've got to know it's not worth the fight. If he stays there and he hasn't won the election, what is going to happen to America?
Well, I think we should have a look at the impact that this results tonight have had on America. So you actually spoke to someone in America early this morning about the results so far. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so bit earlier this morning, but it was with Professor Kanishka Chowdhury. He is a professor of English and Cultural Sciences at the University of St. Thomas in Missouri, which is a state that has gone red. Minnesota. Sorry, I thought Missouri wasn't a state. It's a city in the state. But we talked about just, as the results came in, we're kind of in the same limbo as we were now. Obviously, Trump did make that statement then. But we kind of spoke about generally the results that came in, and obviously Donald Trump's approach to Twitter, for example, which has been used this morning, and also to Black Lives Matter, and also arguing, is Joe Biden what America needs? What can he do?
Yeah. Twitter has been a key part in this political platform. So now let's take a look at this VT where Alex spoke to Kanishka Chowdhury.
So I'm now joined by Professor Kanishka Chowdhury, Professor of English and Cultural Studies at the University of St. Thomas over in the United States. Professor, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Yeah, you're welcome, Alex. I'm glad you're up this early.
Well, someone's got to do it. I've got to pull the short straw here. Firstly, we're recording this at 5 a.m. Some of the results have come in. How are you interpreting some of the results? It seems to be not such a great night for Biden so far. But
right. I think it'd be fair to say that things are pretty indecisive at the moment in terms of calling anything. But a lot of the toss-up close states seem to have gone to Trump. Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, all of which were supposed to be in play and very close. They haven't been called yet, I should add, but they are very much in his favor. And so that's been a bit of a surprise since they were supposed to be more competitive.
a lot of polling. So a lot of the polling from, you look at this year, for example, in 2016, a lot of people are very confused because they thought by 10 o'clock you'd see a very clear Biden lead. And obviously with the mail-in ballots, it may seem that we might actually not get a result today at all. We may actually be end of the week into next week.
Exactly. It's very unlikely that we will know anything tonight. There are a significant number of mail-in ballots still waiting to come in, actually. And some of the states are going to accept it later than today. And then, of course, they'll be counted. So that's a significant point. And that includes certainly Michigan and Pennsylvania, two states with very, very high number of electoral votes that are still undecided. So yes, I think it's going to be a while before we know for sure.
And we kind of look back over the year, and there's been so many events happening. Obviously, coronavirus pandemic, but one of them was obviously the campaign for Black Lives Matter. Interestingly enough, in the exit poll, it came about fifth. About 10% of people thought that racial equality was one of the key issues. Obviously, the language of Trump he's basically, basically denounced Black Lives Matter in a way, calling it something akin to a Tifa. But tonight we're seeing, he's increased his majority of black voters, both male and women. It only seems the only vote demographics actually gone down on is white males. So what are your thoughts about in terms of, his language about Black Lives Matter, and also, the support he has from the African American and also the migrant community in a way?
Right. I mean, this is going to be there's going to be a lot of postmortems done after this election. And I think that's going to be a very significant topic, and it's going to lead to a lot of dissecting. Yes, it seems that, at least based on the early exit polling, that he has increased some of his numbers from both Latino voters in Florida as well as African American voters. But I think, again, we have to measure them against the turnout ratios and things like that. So I'd like to wait and see the complete figures. But as far as his attitude towards BLM, yes, it's been very much negative. And in fact, he has, ever since the uprisings in Minnesota and then on to the other cities, and then recently in Kenosha, and given his very strong anti-immigrant stance, that he would be received disfavorably amongst Latinx voters. But at least from what we can gauge in Florida, that hasn't entirely happened. It'll be interesting, though, to see what happens in Arizona, Nevada, places also where there are significant voters. Those two states are also up for grabs, and I think that'll be significant as well.
Yeah, currently on the BBC, they have called Arizona for Biden, but as I say, a call is nothing. I think a lot of people were looking at Miami-Dade County, where they've got quite a high amount of Cuban American votes that obviously come in, and they saw Joe Biden as this kind of like socialist communist. Which to someone in the UK is completely ridiculous, because it doesn't seem like that at all. In terms, again, with going back to Black Lives Matter, anyway, is Joe Biden the change or the kind of the driving force behind the racial equality there? Obviously he's worked with Barack Obama, he's got Kamala Harris on board now, but is he enough?
No, I mean, Biden has always been a straight down the middle mainstream Democrat, and he is aligned to the center of the party, and in fact, arguably the more liberal candidate in both 16 and 20. I don't think young people see the Democratic Party, particularly young people of color, see the Democratic Party as being a sort of the harbinger of change, of real transformation. If anything, if you recall, the BLM movement started during Obama's presidency, and what happened in Ferguson and later on in other cities, certainly Trayvon Martin's death, all of these flashpoints happened at a time when we did have a Democratic president, and we had someone who was ostensibly very much interested in racial justice. So systemic racism is not something that Biden was going to fix. He might have obviously come up with some policies through pressure from the left of the Democratic Party, but I don't think that his own understanding of what really is at stake here in terms of the kind of economic disadvantages that minority communities are facing, particularly during the pandemic. I don't think that this would have been solved right away by any means.
Obviously, as a professor of English, I'm guessing you look at the language of Trump quite a lot. And it's quite interesting on this end, because if you think about the term fake news, for example, that's something he arguably coined up, and it's used all over the world now. And the main way he obviously communicated that term was through Twitter. This year, for the first time, probably long overdue, you saw Twitter kind of fact checking and kind of, I wouldn't say completely censoring Trump, but, making sure he is being honest and truthful, which has obviously caused a bit of debate in the US. How interesting is Donald Trump's use of Twitter and also the language he uses on it? And What kind of effect has that had on American politics?
Oh, it's had a huge effect. I mean, Obama did use Twitter, but he used it sparingly and certainly nothing like Trump has used it. The New York Times did, I think, a pretty substantial feature right about this time in 2019, where they did a comprehensive survey of his tweets, and thousands of them, literally. And what is unusual about what he's done with it, even if you take aside the language for the moment, is that he's used it to conduct government policy. He's actually announced policy measures without it going through the sort of formal channels, right? Whether it's immigration or something like that, he would actually announce that this is what he's going to do. Of course, many of the times, he's had to backpedal for obvious reasons. But nevertheless, this was the first time that an American president was actually using electronic media to announce foreign, policy decisions. And I think the other thing he's done, and this has been a little more, I think, neglected, but has had equally and sort of an insidious impact, and that's the people he's tweeted, right? I mean, he has retweeted very, very, and this, even people who are on the far right in the UK, whose views are certainly not by any means going to be mainstream, and he's legitimized a lot of positions that are very much on the margins. And so he's done two things with Twitter. One is to make these kinds of statements directly, but he's also used it to attack who he thinks is undermining of course, personally, but of course he represents, as far as he's concerned, he represents the American people. So of course, this is a larger war against all the forces of the pillars of the establishment, if you want to call it that, right? And he's the anti-establishment figure, of course. And so Twitter became an instrument to promote that anti-establishment message.
Thank you very much for joining me, Professor Chowdhury. I know it's very late where you are, very early here, but it's been great chatting to you, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
They fit hand in hand. And like we said, a lot has changed since. Let's have a look at the results so far. Biden has 238 electoral college seats and Trump has 213. We'll be continuing to update this throughout the morning and also speaking about the impact on other countries, including the UK and China. But for now, let's have a look at the mood on social media. So over to you.
Hi, I'm here with Ellie, our social media presenter. How are you doing, Ellie?
I'm good. It's very interesting, this election this year.
It's a bit different. It's like no election we've seen before.
Yeah.
So I imagine a lot of people have got opinions on it. One I'm dying to hear from is Piers Morgan. What's he saying?
Well, he is reacting to the speech that Donald Trump made a few hours ago, and he has said, "This is unbelievable. Trump has claimed victory, branded the election a major fraud on the American public, and demanded no more votes be counted." So there's a lot within that Trump has said.
Do you know what? It is true, and it is just typical Trump. You know, you expect him to take. He won't accept a loss. I think everyone knows that now. You know,
Exactly,
he said that if he looks like he's losing, he will say, you know, it is rigged. There's cheating going on. I suppose you've got to back yourself, which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But I think he does so in such an arrogant way. But I also think it's a bit rich coming from Piers Morgan. Sometimes I'm a bit like, it's like the Clash of Clans, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting that it's Piers who said that, and I mean, from Trump's point of view, I guess even when we find out who the president is, I don't think the story will be over at that point.
Oh, no. This election's not going to end today, next week, or even January 20th when they're meant to be in office. I think it'll be going on for a long time after that.
And I think a lot of people on Twitter agree as well. There's a lot of people divided, especially after the speech. If you just look at the replies, there's someone agreeing with Trump, saying Dems have been trying to steal the election. there's someone who's suddenly changed their mind about being a Trump supporter after the speech. It's all very divided. I've got another tweet as well, which from Jessica Christian at JA Christian, and this proves that very interesting candidates this year, that more people are wanting to turn out and vote. She said, "A man stopped me on the street in the Mission to ask me where the closest polling place was, so I walked him to one nearby. He's 63 and to date is his first time voting. I see all this bull going on and all this violence and I don't want it to ever happen again," is what he said. #election 2020. So that just proves he's 63 years old, voting for the first time. He feels like he needs to vote this time in particular, especially with things going on such as the coronavirus pandemic and Black Lives Matter. I think it's really interesting that people feel that way.
Definitely. I mean, do you think that the turnout's been so big, maybe, so this could be a blessing from the coronavirus, because there's now so many ways people can vote, and it's encouraged people to vote. And I suppose, obviously, being in lockdown and seeing how Donald Trump has handled coronavirus, I reckon that's got a lot to do with the swing of the votes, because if people think he's done a good job, then they might back him, but if they think he's not, then obviously they're going to support Biden, because I think Biden's policies are more to do with healthcare and things like that. So do you think, obviously, is that what Twitter's saying? Are they saying, you know, that they're voting this time because it's such a big election, or because coronavirus has influenced it and they want someone to actually lead their country properly?
I think, to be fair, there's a lot of different reasons why people are voting. Another big reason is the whole Black Lives Matter movement.
Of course.
Although actually no one really believes either president is fit to be good with that sort of thing. Being two old white men.
Well,
so it's not very representative of the people, but I think that is probably one of the most important issues.
Definitely.
But actually, overwhelmingly, a lot of people are saying that they don't like either candidate. That's very common.
Oh, right, okay.
So I've got a tweet
Wasn't
here
expecting that.
from Christian at Irritating Chris.
Nice.
Good name that. The #US elections 2020 will be historic. No matter who wins, it will show if one of the oldest democracies is able to protect itself from division, mistrust, lies and hate, or if it gets torn apart in emotional manipulation and individual egoism. At Joe Biden, at real Donald Trump.
Oh, it is. I think that is common. I've seen that on Twitter. You know, people mocking them for their age. You know, they're saying, "Do we really want two old men fighting all the time and one leading our country?" I think, you know, age does come into play, whether you think someone's a fit leader or not. Whether it should, I don't know. They're saying, you know, the older you are, the wiser you are. Is this the case with Donald Trump and Joe Biden? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And obviously, Twitter's a bit unsure as well. But I wasn't expecting them to have to people to not like either. I suppose you can see it as like picking from a bad bunch, innit? Best of a bad bunch. But wow. Any controversial tweets? Anything really stand out for you?
There hasn't been too much controversy, but I do just want to bring up Donald Trump's dancing during his campaign. I think we should talk about that. That's
Definitely.
got a lot of attention on Twitter.
Well,
so, for example, we've got Blue Dog at BlueDog58156037 saying, "I have so many reasons to celebrate tossing Trump out of office, but never having to watch him do that weird Caddyshack gopher dance will be an added perk."
Oh, honestly, he's done, and you do have to laugh about it, and you do see the comical side to it, and you know, it is nice to see, you know, one of your leaders having a bit of fun, but it was shocking. His YMCA was just, there's only 4 moves, YMCA, and he was going like,
it's barely recognisable.
He was just, it was horrendous, and you could see the crowds like looking at him like, what is this guy doing? But he had no shame, and I was like, you know, fair play, he's giving it a go, but it was terrible. But I think as well, sometimes I'm saying that it makes you, you know, see a more light-hearted side to them and a more funny side to them, but then, is that what you want in your president? Like, if he can't do the YMCA, how is he expected to run the country? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, that's a very good point.
Questionable. Oh, so that's very interesting. Have you tweeted anything yourself? You
I'm
getting involved?
Not personally, I'm trying to not get involved. I think also because we're not able to vote being in the UK, I think it's just best not to share too many opinions, really.
Definitely. I mean, I've tried to be as impartial as I can, you know, reading tweets about both of them, which I'll play later on in a game of Trick or Tweet, so stay tuned for that. But it's hard because we live in an echo chamber these days. You know, you're very one-sided, and you only see tweets. Like, I've only seen tweets like slating Donald Trump. I've not really seen the other side for Biden. So that might make the election exciting, because they've said it's very, very close. They're not sure at the minute who's going to take it, which is interesting, because I think a lot of people did think a couple of weeks ago Biden was strongly in the lead. I don't know if is that the impression you're getting?
I think a lot of people, especially over in the UK, have woken up today and been quite surprised to see how close it is at the moment. I think a lot of people were expecting Biden to run away with it, especially over here. Many people that I've spoken to have not been in favour of Trump. So it is quite interesting to see that it is very close, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Oh no, it'll be an interesting race for sure.
Definitely.
So shall we take a little look at a clip? That was very bad.
US election coverage live 9 a.m. till 12:30 this morning. Now, we have had another change in the battleground states, which Joe Biden is now being shown to lead Wisconsin, just showing how much could potentially change later on throughout the morning. These states now, like we mentioned earlier, may change because of in-mail voting. This is looking great for Biden if he does win Wisconsin. What are your thoughts about this?
So looking at it now, it's slightly going up. So Joe Biden had an 8,000 lead. It's kind of now gone down to about 7,000. It's very, very tight. There's 0.3% within it. The important thing is Wisconsin have only got 5% of the results left to count. So that could mean, if they're quickly enough, we could get an extra 10 electoral votes for either candidate. But it is so close. It's just, I don't really know what we can say, because it's like, you know, anything can change. Obviously Republicans use the email voting, it's not just exclusively Biden, but yeah.
And we've just had some more breaking news that Joe Biden's team have called Trump's statement earlier unprecedented, outrageous, and incorrect. Now, this is breaking news. We were waiting for a response from Joe Biden's team that we knew would be coming quite quickly. Now, we'll just briefly speak about Trump's statement that he said earlier, just to remind everyone what actually happened. Trump declared that he'd already won the election, even though that has not actually happened yet. He's also claimed that he's won certain states which haven't actually been called yet. So a very interesting response from Joe Biden's team. I think it shows the character of Joe Biden not being as reactive as Donald Trump, because I think if the shoe was on the other foot, it could be a very different situation right now.
Well, I can relate it to an analogy, basically. It's like if you win a football match, like 3-0, and then like the 50th minute you just stop playing.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you've won the match. And this is the situation here. There is still so much to play for. Like, but Trump openly said, like, we've still got 30% plus to count. Everything can change.
Everything can change. And like he did say, they are potentially bringing it to the Supreme Court. That's what he wants to do. That's what he wants to do.
It will take a while.
It will. And this can drag out the election for the US people who have already gone through a lot. There's been a lot of social unrest. And I think it is quite unfair for this to happen to the American people. But that is just some breaking news that we have updated you on. Okay, for now, I think we should move on to looking at the impact of the US election results. Obviously, we don't know who the clear winner is, but we have some rough idea. So, as we know, the US election will have a huge impact on other countries, which we will be discussing in a minute. But for now, we want to have a little look at the students' opinions on the US election so far.
Young people between 18 and 29 make up the largest voting demographic in America, but historically have had the lowest turnout. With the election just around the corner, I spoke to young Americans to see how they felt about the upcoming vote.
My name is Diana Garcia. I am from Cincinnati, Ohio, but I'm currently living in Centerville, Virginia.
My name is Donna Fay. I'm from Alexandria, Virginia, and right now I'm in Virginia.
Hi, my name is Alexander Powell. I live in Virginia, which is on the East Coast, located close to Washington, D.C.
How consequential is this election? How important is it to you?
Um, Importance? It's not really that important just because knowing how America's government systems are set up, like the national election really affects the world more than it affects our country. Whereas like our local and state elections are really what will affect like me as a person.
This probably has to be the most consequential election that Americans in the globe have faced in an incredibly long time, particularly for young people. Right now in American society, a lot of young people are feeling a huge economic strain, not only because of healthcare, but because of just the lack of capacity of upward mobility for a lot of folks in finding jobs postgraduate, because the market has been saturated with a lot of young people who are just incapable of finding employment in the labor market, because we all have kind of a settled base of education. And so a lot of people are feeling the stress of the job market, of healthcare, also of other sort of more identity-based politics issues. And so I think that the election consequentially for young Americans is huge, especially compounded with the COVID crisis.
Out of the two candidates, which candidate speaks to young people in America right now?
I mean, I would say by default it would be Biden. Um, but I think as far as like, I think he knows exactly what to say that people are like the young group are like passionate about at the moment. Um, but even then, I'm it's like a debate of whether or not he truly even knows what truly happens or what like people go through.
I think that both candidates, ironically, are two of the oldest candidates that we could have ever imagined in this time period. And that's not for cause of us not having younger individuals that are qualified and capable to run for the highest office in the land in America. But nonetheless, I'm not so sure that they speak across the aisle to any young voter. I think largely young people tend to be more liberal, which is no surprise. So Joe Biden is probably the favorite, I would say, for most younger individuals who are looking to vote. But in that same vein, I think that you are seeing a movement of younger people, particularly in rural areas, who are a little bit more, I don't want to say susceptible, but feel that President Trump does speak to their inclinations and the kinds of fears and worries that they see in their communities. So in terms of the geographic boundaries in America, I think that, you know, each kind of candidate speaks to their population, and it's pretty entrenched ever since Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump in 2016, and I'm not sure so much has changed.
So recent reports have shown that young people are voting more than in the last election. What do you think is different that young people feel that they need to come out now and vote?
I think this is the start of Americans becoming global citizens versus just, oh, we're in America, we're good. But that means that you're going to start, we're going to start caring about, yes, what goes on here, but also what's the effect. And I think young people have been seeing not only the effect in their country or in America, but then also in the world. So it's after a while, it's hard to, you can't block it off anymore. It's like, damn, I know things are happening, so I want to say something.
I think people are incentivized to go vote. I think now, especially with like mail or voting by mail, or voting early, and voting early, and being able to do like absentee voting and everything has been a lot more accessible now, especially with voting by mail. So I think people are more incentivized to do it because they're like, well, now what's your excuse? You can just easily send it out.
So if they're trying to get the youth vote, what do they need to be focusing on right now, in your opinion?
I think there's a compilation of things. Like there's climate control that more and more, I would say, youth are becoming more aware of, or at least accepting as a thing that could be detrimental in the future. I think that race kind of comes into it a little bit.
So I would say, I mean, I guess like as far as like issues, anything to do with policing, whether that's like adding trainings or actually giving police tasks that they're trained for. Um, Most police deal with issues that they're not trained for. If I'm trained to deal with violent situations and you put me in a non-violent situation, although you should never be killing somebody, regardless of anything, but if you put me into a situation that I wasn't trained for, I'm going to react in the way that you trained me to react in general. So I think a lot of them have been like they're dealing with traffic issues when we have highway patrol. You know, they're dealing with mental health cases when we have mental health specialists. They're dealing with abuse cases when we have social workers. So I think when if like the redirecting of like responsibilities, I think some type of policy within that. I would say climate change. Climate change has been a really big thing. I think people are, as like the environmental person as I am, I think people are a lot more knowledgeable on the topic of climate change and the effects it's having, not just on like the nature environment, but like the entire environment, you know, the people, the animals, the plants, you know, with trees and the water, like everything is being affected. And I think everybody is like more knowledgeable on that. So I would say something with climate change.
From Barack Obama's campaign to Trump's campaign, and obviously to this year's election campaigns, we've seen the ever increasing involvement of social media. How important is social media, especially when it comes to talking to young people about politics in America?
I think social media has become the driving force in how we as a generation consume and think of the realities of our social, economic, and political stature in society. I think that social media is the direct tool, the way in which we are accessing how our friends are thinking about things, how politicians are getting their message out these days. And I think that as a major tool, it's helped facilitate a lot of our capabilities and being able to sort of interact with our political system in a new way that has brought a lot more people into the fold. But in that same hand, I think it's really polarized us, and it's given us a lot of feedback loops into not really maybe being able to understand perspectives of people that are not in our immediate social circles. And I think that the social pressure of the importance of this election, the kind of social media you know, platforms pushing the get out the vote efforts. You see it on Facebook, you see it on Instagram, the voter tags and all of that definitely create a kind of sensation where if you're not voting, you know, you're kind of outside of the scope of what is cool and what is the right thing to do these days. And I think that's definitely helped influence the election turnout for young people.
Nah, I don't think social media plays that that big push. Because you don't, and then the thing about it as well is like places like Twitter, they're limiting how people share um like propaganda or stories about the election. You know, they're either suppressing it or limiting it to make sure that, hey, anything that you're pushing is truth. And a lot of that came back from the pushback of what had happened with Hillary Clinton. So, you know, it's hard to control. It's hard to it's hard to regulate. It's just there now, and it's nobody's really in control of it. They're just trying to bend it so that they can at least get the view that they want.
Who do you think will win and why?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Who will win? Really the $1 million question. Are we going to see what happened in 2016 with all of the pollsters coming out saying Hillary Clinton was going to win and then being shocked? At this point in the kind of election monitoring cycle, a lot of the big polls in the US have Joe Biden projected to be winning in a considerable margin. But again, I would point to the 2016 election as to the efficacy of those kinds of poll results. There have been some international polls that have projected that perhaps Trump is a few margins ahead of Joe Biden. I think one of the really important things that complicates the assessment or projection of who's going to win is the fact that There are a lot of voters who might be inclined to vote for Trump that are not comfortable with saying it out loud just because of the general attitude towards folks who end up voting conservative in the majority of, let's say, cities across America. So I think it's going to be really difficult to project at this point.
I think popular vote will be Biden, but electoral college, part of me really wants to say Trump.
Like, we have to remember, Trump was a great businessman, but Trump is also an entertainer. Like, he knows that what the people want. He knows what is going to actually pull the worst out of people and get them to go vote. Now, does that mean that if Biden wins, I'm going to be shocked? No, but it's going to be like, okay, maybe I'm actually going to look at America and be like, all right, maybe we are really, truly moving more to that global standpoint that I think we are.
Despite polls pushing Biden ahead, many are still unsure if this will become a reality. But what can be certain is that the lives of many young people in America will be forever changed by this election.
To get American students' perspective on what's going on.
Yeah, it's way more personal because they're more affected by it.
Definitely.
So yes, absolutely.
And I feel like they have such more knowledge than probably we do.
Yeah,
which is really insightful.
I didn't know much about the election until recently, to be honest. So yeah, absolutely.
No, definitely. Right, now we're going to play a little game that I've made up called Trick or Tweet. So what's going to happen is I'm going to read you a statement and you're going to decide whether you think it's an actual tweet by either Biden or Trump or whether you think it's a trick. Okay?
Yes.
So the first one. What is Donald Trump really trying to do? Make America hate again?
Honestly, I'm not sure because, I guess it sounds like a trick, to be honest.
It is a trick. It wasn't. I made that up. Next one. I don't see our country in terms of the blue states and the red states. We are the United States.
I think that's an actual tweet. It sounds like something Biden would say.
It is a tweet from Biden. That was one.
Yes.
Once I'm elected president, it'll hit Biden like a ton of bricks, which I'll then use to build my wall.
Oh dear. I think that could be a possible tweet, knowing the things that Donald has tweeted before. So yeah.
That was a trick. I wrote that one. I'm trying to get in the mind of Donald Trump, so I'm glad you said that's plausible.
Yeah, it sounds like it was very plausible.
Next one. In this year's election, I will be voted president. I've just been Biden my time.
I think that's a trick.
Yeah, it is. I thought that was funny though. That was that would have been from
a good one.
Biden. Next one. Steve Jobs would have made a better president than Trump, but I guess it's unfair to compare oranges and apples.
I think that's a trick.
Surely it is a trick. I thought you'd be a bit like unsure on some of these. I think they are quite obvious, aren't they? Next one. Shall I try and do an American accent for this one?
Go for it.
No. Sorry, losers and haters, but my IQ is one of the highest, and you all know it. Please don't feel stupid or insecure. It's not your fault.
I think that's a tweet.
It is a tweet by Donald Trump. It blew up, that one.
Thinks he's tweeted.
These are some of the nicer ones. I had to miss some out because of the language in them.
Oh wow.
This is another one. This one's just a bit off topic. I've never seen a thin person drinking Diet Coke.
Surely that's a trick.
It is actually a tweet.
By who?
By Trump, yeah.
Wow.
Another one. This is potentially in response to Greta Thunberg. Greta must work on her anger management problem. Then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. Chill, Greta, chill.
I think that's a tweet because I think I've seen that before.
Yeah, it is a tweet by Trump yet again.
Oh.
He doesn't believe in climate change.
Yeah.
Questionable. So that was one of his tweets. Yeah, so they were my tweets. You did pretty well in that.
Thank you very much.
You got majority of them. Just the brick one, which I thought was really funny and witty from me. But
I agree. Yeah, and it does kind of sound like something Donald would say.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, it is hard. Some of the tweets that I did look up, they've been removed because they was actually that bad, and the reaction to them have been horrendous. But they both love it. They both love Twitter. So it was a perfect game.
It's a great way to get followers, to get voters, to get people involved.
Definitely.
Persuade them, although I'm not sure how Trump is doing with that, persuading people to vote for him using Twitter.
He's putting them off, if anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, we could play this game for a lot longer, but I'll leave it at there.
Yeah.
We're going to pass over back to Studio One to discuss more results.
Welcome back to Leeds Student Television's live coverage of the US elections. Currently, Joe Biden is in the lead with 238 electoral college seats. Trump has also declared that he has already won the election and stated that there has been a fraud on US citizens and is taking it to the Supreme Court. However, Joe Biden's team have responded, saying that these claims are outrageous. Now let's have a look at the swing states, Alex.
Wow, they are rather close. Like, we all thought we'd maybe get something by Friday, but I think we could get something by this morning, if not late afternoon. So in terms of Wisconsin, Trump is leading, but ever so slightly. Same for Michigan. What else is there? North Carolina's looking quite tight. The interesting ones are Nevada. That's looking quite close to Biden. We're just waiting for the rest of the votes to come in. But the problem is everybody's reporting just different levels because every different news network. It's just a really confusing picture out there. So. It's very difficult to know who's actually completely in the lead until the result comes out, basically.
Of course, and like we said earlier, this has been a very chaotic election, where the results remain largely unclear. Now, this election will have a large impact on other countries around the world, including the UK and China. We're going to have a look at the impact on the UK, especially the relationship with Brexit fast approaching. So, when the referendum results were announced in 2016, Donald Trump actually hailed it as a great thing for the UK, whereas Biden was a bit more sceptical and said that he would have actually preferred a different result. Now, depending on who is the actual winner of the election, could affect our relationship with the US. So, what are your thoughts about the relationship that we could have with Biden or the relationship that we could have with Trump, who seems more keen to develop an independent relationship with us?
Yeah, so obviously the interesting caveat would be, if you think about when Theresa May came to power in the UK about 2016 after Brexit, Barack Obama was still the president and Joe Biden was the president. So obviously Boris Johnson was the foreign secretary. So there is some sort of relation between the two there. But in terms of Brexit as an issue, Biden is very much against Brexit. The Democrats, Biden and also Nancy Pelosi, have quite openly said that obviously we've had this controversy in the UK about, whether they break international law. They've opened it. If you break international law, in particular the Good Friday Agreement, they will not accept any trade deal, because it's fine if the president accepts it, but the way the US works is it must be accepted through Congress. And if the leader of the House is not going to accept it, there's no trade over the UK. So that's what can happen. Trump obviously doesn't like the EU because he feels like they're taking advantage of the US in that kind of way. He has a few issues with Germany, France, purely in terms of NATO, in terms of spending. So I wouldn't be shocked if, for example, Trump tries to pull a similar move to either with China to the EU, or try and give more favourable terms to the UK in terms of rivaling EU countries.
Yeah, of course, their stances are very different on the matter, and especially I think Trump as well, he is pushing for America First principles in this campaign. He wants to bring manufacturing back to the US, whereas Joe Biden prefers the European approach, where we're all together as one, especially because he has more of like an Irish background, and he said that had I been a member of Parliament and had I been a British citizen, I would have voted against leaving. And it is a big matter that's fast approaching. Obviously, we're leaving the EU. Well, we've left. We need a trade deal very, very soon. So it will be very interesting when we have the results to see if Trump does get in, to see our relationship develop with him or with Biden as president. And like we said earlier, the UK won't be the country that's just affected by the US elections. China will also be greatly affected by the US election results. Later on, we've got a lot coming up on the show, but earlier, a couple of weeks ago, someone spoke to someone from Shenzhen about the impact on China, What are your opinions about the trade war that happened earlier on?
So the issue is obviously Trump, in terms of the manufacturing jobs, where have all the American ones gone to? China. There's also an issue relating to Chinese companies. For example, it's been an issue in the UK as well. Huawei, they are a leader in mobile telecommunications, obviously have their own consumer phones, but they are the people who are the leaders in 5G technology. And they have basically banned Huawei. They say they're part of the Communist Party. They're stealing the products of American companies, making it cheaper by stealing all the private information about them. So it's a very, very contentious issue. Obviously, Trump is leading this kind of trade war that's kind of died down now, but it obviously didn't help in terms of certain goods to America. Has it worked completely? I don't think so, really. Like, what benefit has he got? Like, he's probably got a new trade deal with North America that he kind of arm wrestled, but, you know, it's just like he's just kind of thrown his arms about, basically. Will we see a different side with China? Maybe, but in terms of optics, obviously Joe Biden's been accused of colliding with China, so maybe he wants to hold off that for a bit.
Okay, now let's have a look at the impact of China from the US elections.
The United Nations must hold China accountable for their actions.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man.
If Biden wins, China wins.
We urge the U.S. to immediately correct its mistake and stop its unjustifiable accusations against China.
Given the long-term rivalry and complex relationship between the US and China, the US election results will inevitably affect their international relations and bring significant effects to the Asia-Pacific region. Today, we have a great opportunity to interview Dr. Simon Shen from Hong Kong. Dr. Shen is the founding chairperson of the Global Learning Offices, an adjunct associate professor of Chinese University of Hong Kong, Faculty of Social Science, and a visiting fellow of Academic Sinica Taiwan. We are going to look at the presidential candidates' respective attitudes towards China's issues, namely the national security issues, Hong Kong political situation, and the Uyghur concentration camp discussion. We will also speculate the possible impacts to their power dynamics.
To start off with the interview, I think let's talk about the political climate in Asia and give us a general picture of the effects from the US election. How would you describe the differences in the atmosphere in Asia from the last presidential election to the current one?
So basically, the previous assumption of global politics was that globalization should be regarded as a path of no return. So engagement is the mainstream policy of the United States when it faces China. So thus the general approach for the American presidents and governments to handle the so-called China issue, they back to Nixon and also shared by a lot of people ranging from Bush to Obama to Clinton. However, as we all know, is no longer working. So what has been witnessing in the recent changes was that in the United States, people are starting to realize that engagement is no longer an option, is no longer a viable option to face the rise of China. Because the previous assumption was that when you are talking about engagements, you wish to change domestic Chinese policy by contacting and spreading your ideas and conveying the messages through the daily interactions. But in reality, the outcome has been the opposite. Right now, it's the Chinese government that has been very effective in terms of transforming the norms and the ideals of the Western world instead of being transformed domestically. So when we talk about global politics right now, we have to realize that the game has been changed and we're looking forward to a new paradigm, and that's what we call the paradigm shift. So that's how we study the latest presidential election in the States.
Yeah, I think we do have seen a great change between the China and US relationship in these 4 years after Trump has taken the presidency from the last election. And specifically talking about the China's issue, US intelligence thinks China prefers Biden over Trump. Do you think this is the case and why?
Well, first, I don't think we we really know how the US intelligence thinks. So there are different reports, and there are different allegations suggesting that maybe Trump or Biden has been prepared by some people, but I think that's not the point. We should avoid personalizing everything. Right now, after all, it's not a choice of people, it's a choice of the structures. Right? So the question is, what kind of structures would the two candidates respectively represent? According to the official platform, Joe Biden is a very traditional elitist in the States, right? So most of the foreign policy advisors in his team had some experience in the Obama administrations. That means they still prefer the engagement policy, even though apparently they also realize that we have to be tougher on China, we have to be more cautious regarding this anti-engagement politics of China. But at the same time, as he said on the television debates, he said his goal is to bring China back to the international game and to make it binding to the rule. So that's the kind of policy of Joe Biden, to use the international regulations to govern China. However, that's nothing new. That's precisely the same old policy of Obama and Clinton, to try engaging China through the international norms, but eventually the norms has been transformed. So that's option A. Trump, however, that's more interesting. Apparently, he has some vision in mind. At least his teammates have some visions in mind. So he would like to present an alternative to the Americans, that is to use a different approach to handle China. However, the major critique about his policy is that he has tried to destroy a lot of things, but we don't really know what kind of prospect are there in mind. So, for instance, when he suggested to create a new platform to handle China, we haven't seen any platform yet. So that's the major uncertainty. He is quite skillful in destroying some existing framework, the status quo. However, in terms of building a new status quo, a new structure, a new regime, a new paradigm, and it seems that he's not particularly good at that. So what we are observing is that whether the two options can be more or less combined, people in the world are looking forward to some structures, and you need some traditional skill sets to build a structure. However, you also need some thinking outside the box kind of a mentality to dismantle the existing structure and to have new paradigm to be accepted by the masses. So more or less, you need to combine the advantages of the two candidates and to hope for the best out of the existing election. I think that's the most positive thing that we can think of.
Yeah. I think we could take deeply into some special issues regarding to three aspects, and we could compare the candidates. And in the first aspects, in terms of the national security issue, such as TikTok, after being elected as president of the United States, how would they handle this issue, and how would their presidency change the relationship between US and China?
Well, it's not that straightforward in the sense that when you talk about national security, and it's always being constrained by other factors like personal freedom and the principles of liberty, etc. So that's what I'm saying. The Chinese government is right now very skillful to play by the Western game, say by lobbying the pro-China firms to do a JR against these executive orders. So that is the kind of cases that can be expected. There will be some executive orders by the presidents to handle these TikTok, WeChat issues through executive orders, as mentioned, but that could be challenged by other measures within the United States, jurisdiction and other congressmen and lobby groups and even the firms directly. So we would expect the coming years to be a very fierce battle behind all these players, the executive, the legislature, the jurisdiction, and the think tankers and the lobby groups. China can still manage to play this game in the coming years, I believe. However, when you talk about the real national security issues, whether there are some real impacts, so once these impacts are being proven, and the public opinions can be swinging. So I think, especially for Trump, he's always looking forward to one or two cases like that, and then the entire population can be convinced, and his executive order can be more effectively implemented. So some historical lessons can be learned from, like 100 years ago, when there are real danger, a real sense of currency, a real sense of urgency that is being sensed by the general population. the overall policies can be changed in a very rapid manner, but you need some cases. You need some cases to be established that is easily comprehensible by the masses. And right now, I think they're still waiting for that.
That's okay.
Alex, yeah, so basically it's a little twist on the classic game Top Trumps. I'm going to ask you to rate Donald Trump in a range of
if you want to say like.
We're going to see if we agree on this.
Yeah.
So we're going to kick it off with.
Welcome back, considering to at least student relation and what the phrasing might have been. Maybe using I could be like I'm Adam Moff, you could say I'm Alice, and then
You're going to give
into
him 10?
yes,
That's
so
quite low
far.
to be fair.
We've got I lead by 230 seats.
Oh, well.
230,
I
but
think.
still
So
very
you're going to give him 10. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because I think he does try and spruce himself up a bit, you know, with his very orange fake tan and his bleached blonde hair. He does go for that Donald Duck look, and I respect that. He stands out. You know, his red tie as well. I'll give him 20. I think 20. That's that is generous, isn't it?
I felt generous.
Right. Next one. His personality.
Oh dear, can I rate with a minus?
Oh wow, yeah, you can give him a minus.
Minus 10.
Minus 10. I mean, he's been accused of being racist, sexist, a little bit. But you have to give him credit, he's very outspoken, he tries to be brutally, I don't know if you'd say honest, but
Very confident.
yeah, he backs himself, which, you know, you need to. So, that's a tough one, I think. Maybe, like you said, maybe very low down. Maybe in the 10s. That's being kind as well. Okay, his achievements.
Oh, quite low as well, I would say.
Oh, really? Oh, I think that's quite harsh.
I guess it depends, because they're quite negative in a way, but I don't know, maybe like 40, 50. I feel like some of his achievements have been quite good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can argue that he, you know, has he achieved so much because he was sort of born into it, you know, with his dad's being a real estate, and he's sort of been given everything. But, you know, he's achieved quite a lot with The Apprentice in America, you know, running that, hosting that. And then, you know, he's got a lot of his own businesses. He's done well, he's done well for the economy, I suppose. But, yeah, any political background, really. That, you know, when you look at it like that, he's done a lot. Like, whether you say it's an achievement. Oh, right, okay, we'll go the other way. Popularity. Yeah.
A lot of people just absolutely hating him.
Definitely. 50-50. I'd say he's popular for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. It's like Twitter and even with TikTok.
So we do a little summary.
Yeah, we'll give him that. Fame, so it's kind of like popularity, but would you know, like his global fame?
Oh, I guess that goes to the high.
Yeah.
Talk about Twitter and TikTok.
This might be his best category, I think.
Probably like 90. I think everyone knows about Trump.
He's a film star. He's in Home Alone, and he's a Twitter sensation, like we've said before.
Very, very popular.
But he's got a lot of backlash
So
for
are we
his fame,
stopping this
which I'll give him that. Intelligence.
For him to be able to achieve everything, so outspoken, so confident, he was quite intelligent.
I can see that. I mean, he doesn't think global warming's real and that it doesn't exist.
That brings it down.
Which is a bit questionable, I have to say. So you do, and a lot of the statements he makes, you know, like he obviously thinks building the wall is gonna solve all these problems. Is it? I don't know. He does come, like you said, he is clever in a lot of ways, but also really dumb in other ways, I would say. I don't know. His dance moves.
Oh, I think I don't even know what to say about that. They're so ridiculous. I would probably rate them quite high because of the ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So I'd give him like a 7, 8. You know, just because it's very.
He gives it a good go, doesn't he?
He does. very into it.
So I think we clarify that we probably would never date him.
Absolutely
But
not.
he's doing all right in his life. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's been really lovely chatting with you today.
You too.
And discussing all things politics.
Hello and welcome back. Thank you for
which is
joining us for our coverage here at Leeds Student Television, where we're reflecting on one of the most craziest and most bizarre election nights I think we've seen for a number of years in the United States. I'm Adam Waugh.
I'm Alice Spall. So, as Adam said, this has been a pretty crazy night as elections have gone. Both sides have said that they think they're going to win. I mean, Trump's come out straight and said that he has won, which is just not true at this point. So this could take a long time to get some results out.
Yeah, so obviously in relation to that statement by Trump, Biden's already said this is, well, his campaign manager said this is outrageous, this is, incorrect. Yeah, so currently Biden's leading by 238 seats to Trump's 213, but obviously they're both striving for that all-important 270, which will get them the presidential seat.
Yeah, we're still waiting for some key states out here. We've got Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all waiting for these key states, especially we're waiting for results in Philadelphia, which is going to be strongly Biden, but we'll just wait and see what happens.
It's been very interesting, I think, especially the polls haven't necessarily reflected what's going to happen, but even still, we're still in this excitement stage where we don't know which is going to switch to where, who's more Trump, who's more Biden. But reflecting on that, we're actually now going to cross over across the pond.
I can.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's, bright and early in sunny Minnesota, as always.
Yeah, thank you so much for getting up so early to talk to us. I mean, this is not a sociable hour to be on TV. So, how are you feeling about the results at the moment? Do you think it's still all to play for, or do you think one side is going to win?
Yeah, I was definitely avoiding the results as long as possible, especially because a lot of people had said we might not know by the end of November 3rd, and they were correct because it's the morning of November 4th, and we still don't know. So I tried to find as much peace as I could last night and just relax and watch Netflix and, very sparingly look at updates. It's still super close, so I don't want to, get too excited. But this is actually the first time I'm actually seeing the counts for Biden v. Trump, but a lot of key states haven't come in yet. And because of the way our electoral college works, a few states could really just make or break the election at this point.
And Chioma, obviously, this election's been huge for everyone. It has been branded as one of the biggest elections, for a long time. But, I mean, what do you think, especially on the impact this is having on young people, especially young people in America?
Yeah, I think young people in America, especially, I think if you include COVID as well, a lot of us are at home, a lot of us are out of a job, and a lot of us are realizing that there are a lot of people making decisions for us who are well beyond their years, and they mean very well, but I think it's time to, pass the torch. And I think a lot of young people are, I think, realizing that it's more than just voting. I've seen a lot of people my age move beyond voting. They've been, in the streets protesting, and they've been, knocking on doors and all the things that happen outside of just election day, because everything leading up to an election day is just as important as, what happens at the polls as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so do you think this impact on young people has led to this turnout being so much higher this year, especially with first-time voters?
I think who our president is has really influenced why there's so many voters this year, especially young people. I was talking to a friend about it recently, and I think the more outrageous the president, the more likely you're going to have increased voter turnout because they just want to vote him out. With the outrageous things that Trump says, it really encourages people to want to go out there and exercise their vote, because we kind of got cocky 4 years ago, and we all thought Hillary was going to win. The numbers were showing that she was, and that didn't happen. And so now we're not taking anything for granted, and we're really doing everything in our power to, not put our eggs all in one basket and exercise all our rights, all the voting, all the phone banking, all the all the possible avenues it takes to get him out of office.
And obviously, there's been so many different factors to this election, but one of the main reasons I think people said they voted this year was actually how Biden and Trump both stand on racial equality, and obviously Black Lives Matter was a massive movement earlier this year. So what are your thoughts on that and how that sort of impacted this election? Do you think Trump and Biden are the right sort of people to be leading in those sort of social circumstances?
I think as a whole, maybe having two elderly white men aren't the best people to be, leading the conversation on race relations. If that's what we have, then that's great. But, ideally, I wouldn't have chosen them. I think comparatively, Trump has made it known time and time again that he will not denounce white supremacy, not just recently, but ever since 2016. He's made that known. He has never once, condemned the actions of any of his followers. Whenever we see acts of crime committed against people of color, and the person committing those acts of crime was very openly a Trump supporter, he always has no comment and doesn't say anything about it, and that just speaks to his character. And I think with Biden, at least, I think he's very willing to say that he's very willing to acknowledge that he's an old white man who doesn't know much. And I think I really appreciate that. I was like, as long as you hire people who do know a lot, I'm okay with that. And I think a lot of people, especially in the very beginning, we were kind of hesitant about Biden because it felt like he was really riding on the coattails of Obama. He was like, well, if I was good enough for Obama, I don't have to really convince any of the black people. Well, you still do because you're not him. And so I think now he's kind of learned that and admitted that he doesn't know much. And as long as, he picks people who do know a lot, I think of the two, I think Biden's a much better choice of talking about in terms of race relations.
Definitely. So we've seen at the moment the country is so divided, and there's been a lot of unrest and tension in the country over the last few days, especially building up towards election day. We've seen buildings being boarded up in Washington, D.C., and Trump supporters ramming Democrat cars off the road. Is this something that you were worried about, or you think this will be an issue in the next few days?
Kind of. I don't live in the cities. I don't live in the Twin Cities. I live in the suburbs, so a little bit 30 or so minutes outside of the Twin Cities. So I'm not necessarily worried for my safety. However, my mother frequently works in the cities, and I have a lot of friends who live there. And so that's something I'm always concerned about. There's been a lot of posts circulating about, stay in your houses a few days after the election, all those kinds of things. And I don't really know how to digest those, because it feels like even if we win, even if Biden wins, we still lose because people who wanted Trump to win will still not go down without a fight. So that's kind of frustrating in that way.
Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much for joining us, Chioma. It's been so lovely to speak to you.
It's great talking to you guys too.
Oh, thank you. And come back to Leeds soon. We miss you.
When they open the borders, we'll get COVID under control.
Absolutely, we'll party and celebrate. Oh, thank you, Chioma. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
So that was so interesting to listen to an American student's perspective, definitely, because I think in the UK we see all these headlines, mainly anti-Trump headlines, but to actually listen to someone else's perspective, it shows, in there, especially when you asked about, the social issues that's been going on. I think it's actually so important to recognise people are actually out there living in such a divided country.
Exactly. All we see is the headlines and the tweets of the viral pictures of these buildings being boarded up. But actually, what is it like living there at the moment? We don't know. But now we've spoken to Chioma, that's been really helpful to find out.
And as you say, speaking of social media and things that are viral and everything, we are now going to cross over to our studio to look, all the social media that's been going on over the night, everything from UK and US perspective. So we're going to pass over to them now to hear what's been going on online.
Hello, I'm and welcome back to Studio 2. So in this segment we're going to be talking a lot about the events that have really impacted the campaign. So
Try to drag up.
we did it. And so yeah, what
Sorry,
do you
that
think
was
is the
easier.
big thing?
I didn't know, I thought you'd said 30 and then I was like trying to, and then you were like 20, I was like...
Really impacted the election and it really showed us who Trump really is. I think his recent comment was that systematic racism doesn't exist.
Yeah.
He said, I hope it doesn't, and it doesn't exist. So I think that's kind of weird to say. I think he's just delusional and doesn't see the truth. I don't know.
I think it's really scary that he says all these really big things such as, you know, about racism, and so his comments about Black Lives Matter, you know, he tweeted like when the looting starts, the shooting starts, and that's like horrific. He called the protesters like terrorists. And what's really scary is this isn't hidden, like he knows, he says these things, and yet people still are voting for him. Like there is still, like it's such a close call, like that is really scary for me.
He also supported this guy who was shooting the protesters and who was like removing the graffiti, I think.
Yeah.
He said he's doing a great thing. He was just protecting himself. Well, no. Yeah. It's just because he was white boy. He was protecting him. I think he's just a racist.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. But I studied in our politics module that negative coverage of Trump is still good for him.
Yeah.
And it doesn't affect his popularity because his supporters will be like, whatever, I still support him. So even if it's negative, it's just coverage. He needs it.
Yeah, it's scary because whatever he seems to do, it's, you know, if that happened here, a lot of it would be, he'd be kicked out, but
Yeah,
he's
for example,
not.
like the Labour leader, the ex-leader, was his
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, he was removed because he was saying like anti-Semitic comments.
But here it's like continued racism. So going to Corona, which has obviously been such a big impact, without even taking into consideration how that's affected people's mindset, one of the major things that Corona has impacted is the way that people are voting. So a lot of people, for a record number of people, have voted through postal vote for the first time because they are, you know, they can't go out and vote to stop the spread of coronavirus. So how do you think that's going to like affect the way that this election has been run?
Well, I just hope it's gonna be legal and it's gonna be right. They're not gonna be stopped. They're not gonna stop the counting because Trump wanted the counting to stop and he said that the election system is fraud. Well, I don't know. We just need to count not us, the Americans need to count every vote, and they need to count every mail that comes. And if people request the mail ballot back and wanna go and vote like physically, then I think they should be allowed to do this. And also they should keep standing in the line if they were not able to vote. And it's difficult to count all the votes right now because they are coming from everywhere. So
it's also really interesting about like what you're saying about like counting the votes, because each different state has got a different like timeline. So some postal votes have already been counted as soon as they come in through the door, and then some of them are counted like on the day of the election, some like when the voting closes. So this is definitely going to take a long time, and it's definitely going to change the way, you know, people are very unsure at the minute, which is really bizarre because it's going to be going on for so long.
Yeah, I watched CNBC, the American television, and I watched it and they said it might go for 8-9 days. And I was like, that's just,
it's so weird, isn't
I'm not going to keep up with it, it's too long, sorry.
And then people that like watched it overnight and then it's like, oh, it will take like 2 weeks. Like that's just crazy.
That's crazy, yeah. No.
And then, so we had the incident where Trump actually did have corona. Well, supposedly. There was a lot of conspiracy theories about that. And then he left in the car and did like the little wave out the window with the corona. How did you respond to that incident, and what did that make you think about him as a leader?
Well, he was not handling corona quite well. He was just not believing it first, accusing China, saying it's China's fault. I mean, seriously, he's a grown man. I don't know. He said to use the
like injecting bleach.
Yeah, injecting bleach, which is quite weird. I mean,
and also very dangerous because people listen to him and he's their role model.
Yeah, also,
and that's people will be copying that.
Yeah, those rallies he conducted, like why were they happening? Thousands of people without masks, standing without social distancing. I think that's crazy.
It's also really sad because there have been so many deaths in America,
yes,
and
exactly.
it's directly from his actions. I think you could definitely say it. And then even, not even the wider, but bringing it back to like in that car, there was a lot of things about how he wasn't socially distanced from his driver, and so he was putting a lot of people at risk.
So we can
for what?
We can identify people who are voting for Trump, people who don't believe in science, who don't believe in masks, maybe don't even believe in vaccines. It might be a wrong assumption, but I mean, seriously, it's corona. It's corona. It kills people. I mean, people are not being responsible. If they go to these rallies, it's not responsible.
Well, so I think we could talk about coronavirus all day, but I think we'll leave it there for now, and we're going to go back to an interview with Chris Patterson and see what he's got to say about it.
The 2020 US election could prove most pivotal, with the pandemic ongoing and a deep recession on the way, and a potential Cold War with China. I spoke to Professor Chris Patterson to find out more about this US election. A lot of the media and people have been saying this is the most important US election in history. Do you believe that to be true, or is it just hyperbole?
Hyperbole. It's certainly amongst the most important. There's all sorts of reasons to think that the United States is potentially at a major crossroads at the moment in terms of its global role, but also its ability to function. A second Trump term would not only diminish the U.S. role, but it would make it potentially far more dangerous than it already has. That would continue to worsen. I mean, we're on the verge of major climate change-driven extinctions and mass migrations and warfare, and without the United States acting in at least a neutral way, if not a positive way, the world is on the brink of crisis that it's going to be very hard to pull back from. And Trump has essentially vowed not to commit the U.S. to improvements in that crisis, but instead to take it in the other direction.
I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization. I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
So it's really right on the verge of losing its ability to act in that way. So for that reason, this is potentially, yes, very important.
There's also been a lot of this reference dating back almost 100 years now to Warren G. Harding when he talked about this return to normalcy. Do you think a Biden administration will bring back those times pre-Trump?
I think a Biden administration will try to gradually work through some of the damage that's been caused. I think Biden is a fairly bland, old school Democratic politician who's been around since the 70s, practicing kind of coalition politics for 30 years and backslapping across the aisle kind of thing, just getting people on board with fairly uncontroversial, far from radical policies over a very long time. So in that sense, yes, it will look more like it has.
We can do something about this. And we better get it done. We better get it done.
We've had a period of odd times in over many decades now, probably for most of my life. That so it's really hard to say what's normal. I mean, Reagan was a radical departure from what had come before. Bush the second Bush was in some ways quite a radical departure from what had come before.
Do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
So it's a bit hard. What was perhaps a bit more like what the world expects of an American government happened under Obama, which was a fairly moderate administration. Didn't do anything terribly radical and engaged broadly with the world. So that sense of normalcy is probably what Biden, particularly having been part of that Obama administration, is likely to try to be pushing for.
This year has been a stark reminder of the issue of race relations and policing in the United States. Does there seem to be any signs of progress from your view? Racial
Inequality and an almost apartheid-like system is built into the American system of social relations, and the U.S. government has been instrumental over well over a century in terms of maintaining that. In some ways challenging it, but in many ways maintaining it. And there's a long way to go. But if there's a Biden-Harris administration, it's going to be one of the best chances over the next 4 years to start to overturn some of those structures, at least to start to chip away at them. But it's going to be a very long process.
So what kind of impact could mail-in ballots have on this year's election?
I haven't seen any reason to think that people who are voting by mail will face problems. There may be calls, particularly as there are in most elections, by the loser of an election to recount or reinspect ballots, but I don't think there's any sense that people who are voting by mail are going to be any less likely to not have their votes counted than those who are. And personally, I hope that's not the case, because I've just done my mail-in vote just recently.
There's fraud. They found them in creeks. They found some with the name Trump, just happened to have the name Trump just the other day in a waste paper basket. They're being sent all over the place. They sent 2 in a Democrat area. They sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
But one of many political ploys the Trump administration is using right now to try to cause confusion and put people off the democratic process. There has never been voter fraud on any large scale in the U.S. Every serious investigation has shown that it's not a problem. It never really has been a problem. Simply by repeating in the news cycle over and over again and mentioning in every speech that it's a problem, gets a lot of people talking about it, and perhaps starts to convince some people, oh well, the election's not going to be fair anyway, so I'm not going to go vote. And the fewer people that vote, the more likely Trump is to do better. So it seems that that's what the strategy is.
What implications could come if it appears that one side is winning by maybe the early stages, but then it switches over?
The risk is that a scenario like that can stir up division and make people even angrier than they already are if they think their candidate has won and then they find out their candidate has lost. So it will inevitably be the case that the actual popular vote isn't known until state by state isn't known until sometime after the election. That's always the case, but typically big media outlets have been willing to say who the winner is on election day. They're making a calculation that even once all the mail-in ballots are counted, even if they all go in the opposite direction, it's still going to be enough to throw it one way or the other. Now, what most major media are saying now, including Fox News, most of them are saying that they're going to be extremely cautious about this and hold off on making any calls until there is certainty.
whoever comes into office next has a big task. To name a few major issues that are going to face us in the next few years: the economy, the virus, China, and the climate crisis. What do you think will be the toughest?
The big role of government is keeping populations safe and keeping them at peace and trying to improve people's lives. And there's lots to do in all spheres. From what I've seen, Biden is consulting a lot of very smart, very experienced people, and as he should be doing, and as he should be able to do, given his long experience. They will be making much more of an effort, I think, to work towards a peaceful world than the Trump administration was, and to reach out to old allies. In other respects, the destabilization that Trump has brought on has made the world less secure. So in the face of climate change, which is the big crisis facing all of us, it's not a pandemic, as annoying as it is, it's climate change that is our big problem. Rebuilding those alliances and rejoining international agreements and working hard towards a carbon-free future, those are all things that this potential new administration has pledged to do, and there's going to be a lot of pressure to do it. So those will be the key goals, and keeping the world as peaceful as possible in the meantime will be a challenge, and it's certainly not for the U.S. to do that or impose its own kind of peace, but by playing a more positive role, hopefully that will be the result.
So now we're joined by Frank, who is our social media producer for the hour. And we've got some big things kicking off online, haven't we? What have we got?
So actually, when we woke up today, look through social media, there's very interesting news. The first one is a British gambler reports bets of $5 million on Trump to win the US election. But
do you think he's going to win?
I wouldn't bet for so much money.
$5 million. I wouldn't bet £5 million on dollars on anything. That is so much money.
It's actually very history amount and the history record. I will bet for Biden with my salary.
Do you think? Oh my gosh. But the thing is, I don't actually know. It's so unsure at the minute that you can't vote just like who you'd want to win. You'd have to think like quite tactically about it, wouldn't you?
I think one thing's really interesting. Like yesterday night, I stayed until 3 a.m. I think it's similar to the general election. I can wait for the whole night, see the results.
Yeah.
Actually, the result probably will come out in a few more days.
Yeah.
So it's actually something really
imagine waiting for that $5 million. What else have we got going on social media?
And also the researcher, they find that the Theresa May, and she said because today it's America and their official lift is it Paris Accord?
Yeah, so it's like the Paris Agreement, which is about tackling climate change.
Yeah, I think this can actually probably change the idea of some voters when they decide who to vote. So I see a record is that people who vote for Trump, they mainly look for the economy.
Yeah.
And only a few of them look for the climate change and the other racial inequality. However, for Biden, people look more like diverse. Vote for Biden for more diverse reason.
Yeah.
Most of them they looking for the racial equality, and also some of them looking for of course the pandemic and also climate change.
Yeah.
So especially at this day today when the American they officially leave the Paris Accords, it's really important for to see who is the next president and whether they can make a more positive change for because I think America they need to lead the world to do more good stuff for our world.
And they've got such a large voice around the world, and so Theresa May's just ended this tweet with, whoever is elected has an immense responsibility to help tackle our planet's greatest challenge. And I think what you were saying about how people look more to the economy for who they're voting for. Theresa May's kind of hit the nail on the head here. It isn't the economy that's the biggest issue at the minute. It's global warming. So the fact that they're coming out of the Paris Agreement is really worrying.
And I was thinking if Trump wins the election, he probably won't go back to the Paris Accord again, right?
So thank you so much for talking with us. We might speak to you again later about what tweets are happening and who's commenting on what. But right now we're going back to Studio 1 to see what they've got.
So thank you very much, Franks and Charlie, for that. So far we've spoken mostly about the presidential election, but there's also a lot of other events going on today, especially on the ticket. We have the Senate race, we've got the House race, we've got the votes on the different referendums going on each state. There's a lot going on. So now we want to talk a bit about the Senate and the House.
Yeah, so just to give an idea of the numbers obviously thus far, for the Senate election, Republicans currently have 47 confirmed seats compared to Democrats 45, so it is quite close, but there is only 51 needed for a majority with the Senate election. So, I mean, obviously Republicans currently held that seat. I mean, how important is it for, you know, to have the presidency, the Senate and the House? Does it need to be all one party, or...?
Well, as we saw under Obama, having a split government, so you have a Democratic president and a Republican House and Senate, it made things pretty impossible for Obama to get anything done because they would block anything that he tried to put through. However, on the other side, if you have all three positions of power owned by one party, then some people would argue that's undemocratic because there's never going to be any checks and balances of power. So it is a difficult situation. I mean, as we've seen at the moment, we thought that the Democrats were going to flip the House, to the Senate, sorry. I mean, 538, one of the biggest pollsters in the US, thought that they had an 80% chance of flipping it. But right now, that doesn't seem quite as likely.
Yeah, so with the states that the results we're still waiting on, especially North Carolina and Michigan, they're very much Republican seats, which would push them a lot closer to that 51 majority rather than the Democrats. But then flipping that compared to the House results, we're currently seeing it's more likely the Democrats are going to take that, really. They're on 188 seats compared to Republicans 181, but there is obviously 218 needed for a majority with the House, so it's a lot more than the Senate seats. But again, with the results we're still waiting for to come in, it's looking as though they're more likely to be pro-Biden, pro-Democrat.
Well, we saw in 2018 that the House flipped to Democrat, and people thought that was a sign of the 2020 election would revolt against Republicans, and that would show that the Senate this year would flip to Democrat. As we're seeing, that might not play out, as we've only had a couple of seats which have flipped. I mean, we're looking pretty much the same senators as we had. One of the interesting ones is Senator Susan Collins in Maine. So she is a Republican, and people thought she might lose her seat, but she does tend to lean left-wing, and she votes against Trump quite a lot of time and against Mitch McConnell. So that might be explaining why she's still holding on to her seat.
Yeah, and then another important seat change is Martha McSally for Arizona, which was very much likely or very much expected to go to the Republicans. She actually lost her seat to astronaut. It's a very, very fancy job, of Mark Kelly, who won with 52.8%, so he took the Senate seat for Arizona, which is also massively unexpected, and that does reflect how, so far in the Senate, there has been quite a few seat changes, but Republicans have won 17 seats compared to Democrats 12, so I think we're looking as though that is going to stay with the Republicans, if we had to predict this far.
I mean, one key difference between this year and other years is we used to have a lot more split tickets. So that means that you would vote for maybe a Democratic president and a Republican senator, or the other way around. Nowadays, that's much less likely, as people tend to vote for the same party. We've seen that in Colorado this year. It has flipped to a Democrat seat because the state of Colorado has voted for Joe Biden. Maybe not necessarily because they wanted a Democratic senator. So the overall state of play with the presidential election does affect the results of the Senate and House election, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then with the House as well, obviously we're from the 2016, or what was it, the House changes every 2 years,
yes,
doesn't it? Whereas the Senate's every
4 years.
4 years with alongside the president. So that's also an interesting role at play, because we've had, you know, Trump and a Republican Senate in charge for over the last 4 years. Whereas the last 2 years has been the Democratic in the House, which obviously is notable, as you say, for a split government. But I think as well what's been quite interesting is, you know, Trump coming out and saying about going to the courts this morning and how he thinks, you know, there's already fraud within this election. And I think it's quite interesting then to speak about Amy Coney Barrett, who is obviously Trump's Supreme Court pick.
So, I mean, this is a key example of how much the Senate can affect the result of the election. The Senate rushed through the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett just a couple of weeks ago. Now Trump is saying that he's going to take the results to the Supreme Court, which means that Amy Coney Barrett effectively could be the one to decide that Trump is going to be president, which is obviously extremely dubious and very immoral if that is to happen, especially as the senators rushed through the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett when they postponed the appointment of the last judge when Obama was in charge. For 8 months, they said that he couldn't appoint someone, and they managed to appoint Amy Coney Barrett in, I think it was 3 weeks.
Yeah, so I've got a quote here from Donald Trump, who actually said he was saving her for this moment, which obviously comes across a bit if he's now pushing this into the courts. As current president, he's going to have a lot of power. She's obviously Republican as well. What do you think this will actually mean for Joe Biden if it is going into, obviously, the Supreme Courts?
Well, it really looks like this has been planned by the Trump campaign. They had already decided they were going to come out this morning and say that it was fraud and they were going to go to the Supreme Court, which is, this whole plan of getting the Supreme Court to the Republican side and potentially affecting this whole election. So this isn't good news for Joe Biden, but it just depends now whether the Supreme Court will take this on, or whether they will agree with Trump just because they want a Republican president. It's still to play for, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, we need to see how these results come in. I mean, it's probably going to be another couple of days before we really know what is going to happen.
And I think as well, we knew no matter what, Donald Trump and his campaign and all the campaign team were never going to go down without a fight.
Absolutely.
We never necessarily expected it was going to be this close, but I think now it is. It's definitely worked to his advantage because he can use the courts. He's going to use all the power he does have as president to, keep things going, keep himself in power.
Yeah, and as we know, this is a very complicated election and their system is very confusing. So we put together a video to help you understand how it works.
Need help understanding the US Electoral College's 200-year-old system? Worry not. I'm Teo.
And I'm Alice, and this is the US 2020 Election Wrapped. US politics is dominated by two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. The Republicans are the more conservative right-wing party. Key policies involve gun rights, low taxes and small government, and tightening immigration control. The Democrats are more liberal, calling for more gun control, better healthcare and human rights. They are more left-wing than the Republicans, but many argue that compared to the politics in the rest of the world, they are still fairly conservative. Trump, as we know, has been president for the last 4 years and is pretty unconventional, having come from the business world, not the political world. Joe Biden, his rival from the Democratic Party, was Vice President to Barack Obama, the president before Trump, and so has had a long career in politics. As it stands right now, Joe Biden is ahead in the polls, but so was Hillary Clinton in 2016, and we saw how that turned out. Although these two parties dominate the race to the White House, they aren't the only contestants. There are lots of smaller parties, such as the Libertarians and the Greens, and independents, such as Kanye West. In fact, over 1,200 people are registered to run for president this year. Most smaller candidates are not actually on the ballot in every state, due to different rules and regulations, meaning they can't actually secure enough votes to be president. The rules of the election seem very strange nowadays, as they were written in the 1700s and bound in the US Constitution. You will hear a lot of politicians, especially Republicans, talk about the importance of the Constitution, and American children pledge their allegiance to it every morning in school. The cultural importance of the Constitution and the many safeguarding measures put in place to stop people changing it means the rules of the election are very hard to change nowadays, even if they don't make sense in the 21st century. The presidential race begins way back when candidates announce their intention to run, which sometimes is years before the election. The candidates then spend all their time, money and effort preparing for the caucuses and primaries.
So, the caucuses and the primaries. The candidates from both parties play it out in each state to decide who's going to be the nominee for both parties. The caucuses and the primaries are kind of like the Euros and the World Cup playoffs for football. So basically, Democrats and Republicans will set out their teams or individuals to play against each other from state to state, and then whoever gets the most superdelegates and delegates gets the grand tournament, the main election. Completely different to the UK, whereas our own party decide who the leader is. In the US, they spend up to 8 months deciding who's going to be the party leader in the election. So, what are superdelegates and delegates?
Delegates.
Delegates. Well, delegates, the normal local leaders or party activists. The main ones, the big boys that everyone's looking for, are the superdelegates.
These guys are senators, congressmen, former vice presidents, and former presidents as well. The big states that all the candidates are looking for are California, Texas, New York, and Florida. Despite there being the big states up for play on some days, the main day that everyone looks for is Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday is the date where the most states are at play, and whoever wins the majority is somewhat wins the race itself months before it ends. The party conventions. The conventions are basically massive parties to kickstart the real election. It's known for its massive confetti, balloons, and crowds. It's where the VP makes their first choice and accepts their nomination, and where each state pledges their delegates to support the nominee, and then finally for the nominee themselves to accept the nomination and make their speech.
Okay, so the candidates for each party and the vice presidents for each party have been selected. It's time to start the campaign trail. American candidates tend to campaign a little differently to here. The main reason is the amount of money spent on the campaigns. Biden has raised over $385 million in September alone, the most ever raised by a presidential candidate. It is not uncommon for big corporations and big business bosses to donate millions of dollars to the campaign that they think will support them best. And unlike in the UK, there's not as much campaign finance regulation to stop them. They use this money to make TV ads, radio ads, in-person rallies, social media ads, anything to get the voters' attention. They also have in-person rallies, where they have thousands and thousands of people turn up to hear the candidates speak. This year, things have been a little bit different. Trump has carried on, even after he tested positive for coronavirus.
So, the US debates, one of the most pivotal moments in the election itself. Throughout the years, it's caused some interesting moments, whether it's Reagan's smooth comebacks, or George H. Bush's apathy for being there. But most recently, we've had to deal with nothing short of the shit show that happened 2 weeks ago.
The question is, Justice, radical left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your list?
How you can vote varies from state to state. Some states allow for early voting, so you can go and vote in person up 2 months before the election. Some states allow postal ballots, which can be sent up to 2 months before. And in some states, you can only vote in person on the day. People who vote early have made their minds up months before the election, which makes the debates and the campaign trail seem a little bit useless. Ballot sheets can also be very confusing, and there's a lot of candidates and different issues on the ballot that you have to remember. On the ballots, there's not only the president, but there's senators running, representatives running, governors, mayors, and referendums. That's a lot of names you have to remember when you go and vote. This year, early voting has been encouraged due to COVID-19, which means many people are voting in October instead of November. There is always what's called the October surprise. The October surprise is a big news story which breaks in October and could change the results of the election. This year, there was many different October surprises, the main one being Trump catching COVID, but also his tax returns coming out. Sometimes the October surprise is planned, sometimes it's not, but it nearly always goes down in the history books.
But the most important day of the election is the election day itself, which, since the dawn of the American elections, has been the first Tuesday of the November of the election year. Now, in normal circumstances, the media would be live throughout the night in each state, counting in the ballots and telling us which way the state has gone. However, with most people mailing in ballots, and due to the pandemic, this could take up to a week with us not knowing who the next president is going to be. However, the first past the post system still applies, so whoever first gets to the magic number of 270 electoral college points wins. However, even if Donald Trump does lose the election, he will be president for still 2 months after, because whoever is challenging to be in office will then have those 2 months to prepare for his cabinet. So whoever's going to be the foreign secretary, the treasury, health minister, and then the president-elect makes his victory speech. In usual times, in front of thousands of people, but this time, the millions at home.
So there we go. Hopefully now you know a bit more about how the whole US election system works. Obviously having a look at Biden and Trump's campaign videos and how that's panned out this year. I think it's important to focus on from that the electoral seats is how it obviously works in America rather than say number of votes. So I mean, just to draw on quickly, what do you think in terms of the states we're still waiting for to come in, how much of an influential part they'll actually play in what the final result will be?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to play a huge result. how the election is won is the electoral college votes, not popular vote. As we saw in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but she didn't win the 270 electoral college votes, which is the all-important number. I mean, as it stands right now, we are still waiting for someone to reach 270. So these states we are waiting for now are going to play a huge part in getting those points. So how it works is each state will have a certain number of electoral colleges, and so to get those points, they will have to reach a certain number of votes in that state. So in states like Maine and Nevada, they will split their votes, but in nearly other states, they will round up all their votes to go to one electoral college vote. So just one state can have such a huge impact on the whole results of the election.
So that's especially why we are waiting for, obviously, like North Carolina, Pennsylvania, the various other states that are still to come in could play a massive, massive part in whether Trump or Biden take it, or if they don't reach, obviously, the all-important 270, which is the important number. But obviously we'll have to see how that plays out, whether it's days, weeks, months, years, who knows what will happen. But I think it's also important then to look at what people are saying, not just obviously all the important stuff, the information stuff, what has been going on social media. So we're going to cross back over now to our other studio, who are going to keep us up to date with more of the light entertainment side of things. Thank you.
Very interesting talk, Adam and Alice.
Yay,
So
well done.
now we're talking about social media. So
Well done,
obviously
Alice.
this is such a big part of a lot of people's lives. So it is no surprise that it's also been a really big part of the election. So one thing that's been really big, probably because of Corona, but is TikTok. So do you use TikTok?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
I used to make videos, but then I said that it's too addictive.
It is. It's
I am
so
really bad
addictive.
at it, so I'm just gonna
Yeah, I had a lot during lockdown. I used it like every single day. Then I came off it, and now I've gone back in. So, but interestingly, so a big thing about TikTok is that it's this algorithm that really chooses what for you to see. So I've seen a bit about the election on my feed, but it's all been very pro-Biden. I've not seen any pro-Trump stuff.
Well,
So
I think because he tried to ban TikTok, so he's not allowed on TikTok.
Do you think?
I think so. I only saw one reel, because Instagram stole TikTok idea and then it's on TikTok. I saw one where Trump was do you know this crisp cheetah?
Yeah, Cheetos.
This ugly cheetah crisp.
Oh my gosh.
Saying some
It's literally what he looks like.
weird stuff, and then Biden saying some good stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's all I saw.
Yeah, but I think the way that they've used it, because there was that big controversy, wasn't it, when he was like, it's not safe. But people have really got into these echo chambers where they only see what they want to see.
Well, yeah, I think that's the purpose of social media. You only see what you want to see. I mean, I'm not following Trump or any right-wing people because I don't support them.
Yeah.
So I only follow people I like. And I also refuse to accept what they say, even if it's something good. And same with right-wing people, they are not going to accept what left people.
But then I think that's a real flaw in the system. That's not a very democratic way to approach an election. And this is just serving to reinforce that way of thinking, because then you don't actually see the other side. So I think there's going to be a lot of people during this election and seeing, they're going to be really shocked, because all they think of is Trump, everyone's going to vote for him, but not everyone's going to vote for him, and not everyone's going to vote for Biden either.
Yeah, some of them are voting for Kanye. Did you see that? I think in Kentucky there was 0.2% votes for Kanye. I think it's 5,000 of people.
That's amazing. That's
Kanye.
Quite a lot of people. And so talking of celebrities, there's been a lot of celebrities becoming very vocal this year about the election.
I know it's very important, but I'm sorry, as non-American, I was a bit annoyed. They were vote, vote, vote. But I think it's important that they did it.
I think it is, because they've got a really big platform now.
Yeah, and it's good that they're using it for something good and not just ads.
Yeah, no, exactly. Which is what they do sometimes. So some of the big names that have been very vocal. So we've got like Taylor Swift. So she has outwardly been very like vote Biden, has talked a lot about it. Lizzo as well is very. She had her vote song. Did you see that?
Did you see the dress? She was like, I think she was like half naked. There's only one part was covered. It's really beautiful.
Is it? No, I didn't see that.
I saw it like at 2 a.m. But I was half asleep, so I think it wasn't like a dream. I'm not sure.
Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it wasn't.
She was really beautiful.
And then we also had some people supporting Trump. So there was Little Pump there and Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne.
The funny situation with this guy, Lil Pump. Trump was saying like, you all know this guy. He is really popular. His name is Little Pimp.
Little Pimp. Oh my gosh.
I mean, he doesn't know him at all.
Yeah, no, and he's probably just been told to say that. And so we had these politicians, these celebrities who were like really like promoting it. Then we also had like Kanye West, who is an actual celebrity, who's thinking he can make that move into politics.
Was he supporting Trump? I'm also wondering, do Kardashians support Trump or what
I don't know. I haven't seen anything from the Kardashians.
Yeah, same. They're just saying like vote. Okay,
yeah,
but who are
I suppose it is good though, making people vote, because then at least it's more democratic. And so what do you think about the fact that Donald Trump was a celebrity and now he's moved into politics? Do you think that's like an appropriate move?
Well, I'm not really into like celebrity politicians. I don't know, it just seems like a joke, because in 2016, like Russians, Americans and UK people probably were like worried about elections and thinking, oh my god, it's gonna be a disaster. Russians, like including me, were just like, it's gonna be fun if he wins. It's not fun at all, it's scary. I mean, so I'm not sure if celebrities can actually be serious politicians.
And you know when you read about how Obama spent years and years and years like training almost to become the president,
yes,
and
same
then
with Biden.
he just
was
like
trying
walks in.
for a long time, and Donald Trump only won because he has money and because he was popular, tweeting some weird stuff. I think that's the only reason.
And so a big thing as well has been using social media to reach like the young people. So apparently in the 2016 election, less than half of 18 to 29-year-olds in America voted. Do you think this is going to be a lot more this year, and why do you think that might be?
I think more people will vote this time because they know that their vote actually matters, and it's important to vote. It's important to vote because you can make a change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So also, I think it's a bit easier because you can just send a mail. You don't have to go somewhere.
And have you seen like the queues are like so long, aren't they? And so there's also been a rise this year in silent voters. So there may be younger voters or voters from different ethnicities, and people that don't usually participate in like surveys or polls or even voting before. And so there's expected to be a really large turnout for these silent voters, and they just have no idea how they're going to vote. So it's going to be really interesting to see if that sways the election, and whether that is due to maybe the promotion on social media and these different groups that have never normally been reached before actually being reached.
That's amazing. I'm glad that they are voting, and I'm glad that they are raising their voice. It's important. It's important for a change. I'm skeptical about voting in election, but I think in America it's still a democracy. You can still change something. Like I'm not sure about my country, so but it's interesting.
Well, that's definitely been. I think Donald Trump is definitely going to bring that up as a reason why he's going to make it seem like this election hasn't been democratic.
He's saying it's a fraud, but like, well.
But I don't know if it actually is, or whether it's just him, like latching onto this idea that he's actually been putting into place for like quite a few months now. Like he's been like dropping it in, making these hints. So now he can turn around and say this, and it's like, look, I've said this for so many years, or months, sorry. This is why I've not won. I don't know if that's true.
Well, I'm not sure if 2016 elections were like lawful, so I'm not gonna say anything. Did he really win? not saying anything.
Yeah, I suppose it's not just whether the votes were actually like counted properly or whatever, but all the different things that were influenced.
Obviously it's harder this year. It's really difficult for people to count all these votes. It's difficult to, I don't know, it's just like a difficult time.
So I guess we're going to really see the impact like when this all finishes, if it ever does. But so thank you so much for talking. This has been such a great hour, spoken about a lot of stuff. And so now we're going to go over back to Studio One and see what they've got to say.
6, 5, 4. Hello and welcome back to our coverage of the US election 2020. As you can see, no one has reached the magic 270 number, so we're still unsure on who is the president-elect of the United States. But it has been quite an exciting night, hasn't it?
It has. I think it's kind of gone along the lines of what we expected. With a high number of mail-in ballots, we weren't expecting to hear the results so soon, and it looks like Nevada isn't going to continue to give us an update until the 5th of November. But it surely will be an exciting couple of days. It's very close, and closer than what any polls have suggested so far.
Yeah, like I was looking at polls and they were saying it's a 10-point lead to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And obviously we knew the issues were made in ballots, but a lot of people thought he'd win some of the seats, some of the states like Florida, Ohio, that where the mail-in ballots are really important, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
But obviously, they really do matter, because now we're stuck in a situation, in a sort of limbo, where one side's like claiming victory, and the other is like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think Ohio was especially interesting, as they gave Biden the early lead because of all the mail-in ballots, and then you could see that swing of on-day voters favouring Trump quite heavily. So I think mail-in voting is going to be possibly the headline of this election as to who will be the president.
For sure, and obviously a state like Ohio and Florida, they are bellwether states. Normally, whoever wins them is the president. Ohio has only missed twice. That was 1944 and 1960. But it has basically been perfect since 1964. The interesting thing is, New Mexico, that's gone to Biden.
Yes.
That has the current longest streak of tracking with the national popular vote. So, if this goes as planned, according to the bellwether states, Trump would win the Electoral College, but Biden would win the popular vote.
I know, it'd be quite controversial. We kind of saw how that played out in the last election with Hillary Clinton. I think America really has to struggle with this system that is quite contradictory to many other systems in the rest of the world, and how the Electoral College balances with this debate of democracy.
For sure, and obviously, this is definitely a system that favors the Republicans, who do quite well in some of the smaller states that are somewhat overrepresented by the Electoral College. So it kind of, you think, can this actually be changed? But I doubt it can be without a lot of bipartisan effort, really.
Yeah, it would take a huge bipartisan effort, especially in such a polarized America. I don't really see it happening anytime soon. And as well, because of the strong relationship many Americans have with the Constitution, it's up for debate if many changes that huge could be made in America of today.
For sure, like obviously the 23rd Amendment gave DC the right. So DC obviously isn't a state, but it does have the right to vote. It being a state is quite a big issue with the Republicans, because it's such an overwhelmingly Democratic area that it can obviously have some sort of balance within the Senate and obviously the House of Representatives. But you kind of think, how does America move on? You think about 10 years ago, where it's had some sort of bipartisanship. Now it's completely polarised. How do they kind of move on?
It's really interesting, and it's gonna really depend on how the next president takes this relationship with the other side to the next level. Is Biden gonna push them to a more to a system to work with the other side more? We saw his relationship with John McCain, for instance, and they had a very good relationship working across the aisle. Will Trump, if he wins, use this as like a model for his presidency if he wins? It's going to be really interesting, but I think it's definitely dependent on the president and the approach he takes with the other side. We've seen Trump take quite an adversarial take when dealing with Democrats for the last 4 years. Moving forward, knowing that he doesn't have to rerun, will he aim to work with the other side or try to dominate.
I highly doubt he's going to work with the other side. Just knowing
Yeah.
Trump after today, I just don't think. And it's also important if Biden, obviously, the House is under Democratic control with the increased majority. The Senate we don't know about yet. It's very much, it's 45-47, so 47 is to Republicans. But you do have two independents that do sit with the Democrats. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is one of them.
Of course.
So it is basically 47-47.
Yeah.
The issue is, whoever becomes the president, the vice president obviously is the deciding vote in the Senate. So if the Democrats don't take it, if it's 50-50, and then Republicans win, it is going to be quite awkward to get legislative agendas through with a divided government, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen it with Obama. He struggled to pass anything through. That divided government really kind of slows down the ability to make major changes in America. That's why I definitely don't think any electoral change is on the cards anytime soon. But it will be interesting to see how a divided government reacts to the president, especially when we saw the Republicans kind of take such an adversarial stance against Obama. Will the Democrats do the same if they're in that position?
For sure. And I think the issues as well is are these two parties now moulded in their way to be confrontational? Like, the idea is, has Trumpism kind of overtaken the Republican Party? Because obviously you look back to senators like John McCain, Mitt Romney, who have both run in the past, and then you've got new senators coming in that kind of take the side of Trump, being quite confrontational, they're quite socially conservative, and it just seems like there is no way to have any sort of collaboration with each other.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Trying to separate the Republicans and Trump has been quite a hard task. So it's going to be a difficult one moving forward to see if that is even possible, knowing that he has such a strong base and that he really does push those Republican votes forward for the Republican Party. Can Republican politicians win without support of Trump?
Sure, it just seems like you look, obviously here we look at the UK and we think no one works together, but over in the US it's a totally different ball game. It is just absolutely crazy. But considering all things American, we spoke to Wendy Wyatt, who's a professor at the University of St. Thomas. Have a look.
My name is Wendy Wyatt, and I'm the Vice Provost at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the U.S. So I'm an academic administrator right now. I work with our 8 colleges and schools and a team of people who help support students and faculty. I came from, and the reason you got connected to me is that I'm actually also a professor in our journalism department, and my specialty is media ethics.
The stakes are high in this election, and not just because of coronavirus. There is a lot going on globally. What is the mood of American citizens at the moment in regard to the US elections?
I was thinking about this and trying to find the right words, and I really think it's just incredibly tense. People are anxious. People on all sides of the political spectrum are anxious. I think there are so many unknowns. I think I could confidently say that people are just, they want to see this election over and settled and to move on. But there's just tension all around.
Biden is currently leading the national polls, and he has been for quite a long time now. But this is quite similar to in 2016, where Hillary Clinton was leading the polls and it looked promising for her. But because of the electoral voting system, Donald Trump did win the overall election. Do you think this could be a repeat of 2016, where Biden doesn't actually win despite showing a lead in the polls? Or do you think that this is an accurate representation of what could happen next week?
I think we've all become a little gun shy about polling, and we all pay attention to it. And, depending on what we hope will be the results, we're either happy or not happy to see what the polls look like. But certainly 2016 was a surprise for everyone. I do think there are a few things that might be different this time around. One is that the polls did go back and forth a little bit in 2016. There were moments where Trump was on the top, but we just weren't, I think, paying as much attention. Another difference is that there was this big news that came from the FBI director shortly before the election. I think that news that came out quite close to the election was enough to change some people's minds. And because we weren't in pandemic days, election day was the day. We just didn't have the kind of early voting that we have now. So I think, if I'm recalling correctly, we're up to about 59 million people who have already voted. We're getting close to election day, and we haven't had any big news. And I think we might be getting, to the point where even big news that came out may not be enough to change the results of the election.
Just to pick up on about in-mail voting, in a tweet, Donald Trump did say that in-mail voting will be rigged against him. Do you think this has caused anxiety among American citizens who are voting this year?
I think he is effective at causing anxiety about lots of things. Certainly mail voting was a really good solution for, an election season during a pandemic. I think that people overall, maybe I should divide this by people who are Biden supporters, I think, trust the system. They don't trust how that system might be challenged, depending on the results. I think it could be that people who support Trump have been led to believe really not to trust the system because he's good at casting doubt on all kinds of things. We haven't heard as much about mail-in ballots and the system of late. It was a big item several weeks ago. It seems to have calmed down a little bit. I think lots of people have taken advantage of early voting, obviously, but like myself, we were able to go to a site and actually just do early voting. And I trust the system, but I will say I felt better just going there and filling out my ballot and, dropping it in the ballot box myself.
And there is speculation that this election will be different to other years, not just because of coronavirus. Donald Trump has stated, and I quote, that the only way we're going to lose this election is if it's rigged. Yeah. Do you think that Donald Trump will refuse to concede, even if Biden, say, is the clear winner?
I think the clarity of the win is really important here. And so I know lots of people have been making lots of efforts just to get out the vote because I think we want people voting and we want the results to be clear, really, and whoever wins. But, if we have clarity, that's going to help. I think I will not be surprised at all if Trump loses by a small margin and challenges. I think we're all ready for that. I do hope, and I think most people would hope, that our system is strong enough that it will step in and we will have a peaceful transfer of power. This is not the president's election, and this is the people's election.
There are a few key battleground states in this election. For example, Florida, which has 29 electoral votes up for grabs. How important are these battleground states in this election, especially for Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are hoping to swing them?
Battleground or swing states are actually incredibly important, particularly because of the way our electoral system works. And so in a state like Florida, the citizens vote, and whatever the results are in Florida, the person who wins in Florida gets all of those electoral votes. And so they're hugely important. And we've been following closely where Biden and Trump are going in this last week leading up to Election Day, because I think that speaks to where they think they might be able to make an impact in those swing states. And so, where do they see that opportunity? They're going to get that one last visit in.
Donald Trump did have a great victory in 2016, but say, like the polls are suggesting, he does lose to Joe Biden. Why do you think this would be?
I think objectively, if you try to just step back and try to look at this sort of objectively, Donald Trump never made any effort to bring into the fold people who did not support him in 2016. He never made any effort to be a president to the entire American public. And in fact, I don't have the specifics on this, but his approval ratings throughout his term have been lower than any president in history, as I understand it. He's never gotten a majority of Americans to support him. I think also just anecdotally talking with people who maybe supported him in 2016, because they thought he was not a politician. He was offering fresh ideas. He was going to, move us away from these sort of career kinds of people. But I think lots of people have just been really, turned off by him and his character and his treatment of other people and his lack of, ability to express any kind of empathy and compassion and kindness.
And if Joe Biden does win next week, Kamala Harris will be the first female vice president. How significant will that be?
It's incredibly significant. And I think in some ways this has been, we haven't been paying as much attention to this as we would maybe in a typical year, just because of all the things that are happening. But this is a big deal. And Joe Biden has said that he sees himself, if he is elected, as a sort of transitional president. And so, it's quite possible that Kamala Harris could have a big future ahead of her. And so I do hope that if Biden wins, that we take some time as Americans, as women, to really recognize what a big step this is.
Great. Thank you so much for speaking to me today, Wendy. It's been really insightful hearing everything you've had to say.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate your reaching out.
Yeah, that was a great report there. It's always really interesting to hear everything from the American perspective.
Sure.
Just kind of jumping back to the Senate and the House race, it's like we said before, it is very, very close. And I think people kind of forget that the Senate and House do have the election around the same time. So we're looking at the Democrats currently on 45 and the Republican Party on 47.
Very, very tense. The House, so we've only got 188 in for the Democrats and 181 for the Republicans, but the Associated Press is calling it a Democratic majority anyway, so it's pretty much certain. And the President, as you can see, no change there for the past 3 hours. It's fun. So we're going to go over to Studio 2 and obviously talk about some more light-hearted stuff. We talk a lot about Trump and Biden. Let's forget about them.
We get quite intense. Let's see what Maria and Tom have to say.
Hi, I'm Tom.
And I'm Nerea. And we're going to be talking about divisiveness in this campaign, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, it probably has been one of the most divisive campaigns, certainly in our lifetimes.
Very 50-50. I mean, we see it with the results, and it's been kind of like that all throughout the months leading up to the results.
Yeah, there's so much anger, and everyone has a side. So it's there's no kind of cooperation at all, and I think we really saw that in the debates, didn't we? Especially the first one.
There was a bit of a power struggle there. We saw some funny moments with Biden telling Trump to shut up. It was kind of very just everyone interrupting each other like little kids.
It was like little kids, wasn't it? And then, and the whole interruption, even like the moderator and all of that, it's just very, very angry.
They needed to introduce a mute button, didn't they, for the second time?
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that worked. It was much better.
Kind of sad for the moderator the first time, though.
Yeah.
I feel bad. Couldn't get to do his job.
Yeah. But I think it's not just the debates that have shown that they if you look at Trump's rallies and that kind of thing, I mean, it's questionable whether he should have even had any rallies this time around because of the whole COVID situation and a lot of the people there wouldn't wear masks and it's quite rowdy and there's a lot of shouting. Like it's a super spreader event.
Exactly. We see very different stances from their supporters. Kind of Trump supporters seem to not be scared though of those events. They don't wear masks. And we also saw Trump taking his mask off, didn't we?
Yeah, after he got COVID. Whereas if you look at Biden, he's either having very small groups.
Yeah, sending a very different message.
Yeah, it's a
totally
very different message.
In that sense.
And I think if you look at that, that just shows you how completely opposite they are.
Yeah, they're so different.
Like, I think there's been a lot of talk about how they're two old white men.
Yeah.
But
in that, it's so weird.
They're so different though.
They seem so similar on the outside. But then they're actually sending very different messages. And is it working? Because it's really 50-50 at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were talking before about how, especially if Trump lost, America might go back more to normal and it might be a lot less divisive. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case, because even if Biden wins, and who knows at the moment, it looks like it's going to go to court.
Yes.
And it's certainly not going to be over for a long time.
Definitely, going to take a while.
Yeah.
But I think that's 2020, very 2020.
Yeah.
All right.
I got to 4 a.m.
Now we're back to Studio One.
Oh, we're back! Oh, hello, sorry, I was talking about my sleep schedule there. I didn't realize we were live.
It's been a long night for both of us, I think. I think that's what we were just discussing.
But firstly, we're going to talk about also COVID-19. It's been such a big issue in this election, obviously because it has caused such a surge in the mail-in ballots, for example. But also, it's just like, it just seems America's handling, and in particular Trump's handling of coronavirus, has not been great.
No, it hasn't been, and it's really interesting on the exit polls that this was only the third highest issue for Americans. So, despite the fact that he has internationally been seen to not have handled it too well, I don't think this will affect his results, especially not with Republicans.
For sure, and it's like, well, we look at it and it's like, it has become a political issue. Not like, on like masks, for example, like, we think about it in the UK and everyone's wearing masks. We're not right now, but everyone else is.
Yeah, we're socially distanced though.
We are, and everyone, and you look at Trump rallies, and some are reluctantly wearing masks, but none of them are social distancing, nothing like that. And there have been studies, for example, where they have basically linked about 30,000 COVID cases and 700 deaths as a result. So we're not saying 30,000 people have caused it, but the reluctant chain has caused that many cases. So basically, it is more dangerous to go to a Trump rally than be in New Zealand right now.
It's outstanding, especially when you think of the super spreader event with the Supreme Court Justice in Coney Barrett, and even the president getting coronavirus. You would have thought it would have become a less partisan issue, especially at his age, for him to be so high risk. But it still seems a very political topic right now in America, and it has divided the two parties.
I think when he had COVID with Trump, it definitely emboldened him. Like, for example, he's always said it's just a bit of a flu or it's just a bit of a cough, and it is for younger people, but for the older people it is a lot worse. And he obviously had access to great such medical care, which obviously made him better. But obviously we look at Boris Johnson, he nearly died of it.
Yeah.
But then he went on like a hard trip with COVID, and it's just like, and now he's still saying it's a flu, and it just feels like he's just become emboldened and doubled down on this like coronavirus, the hoax. Like, he's openly said that as soon as the election's done, coronavirus will no longer be a talking point. He just thinks it's been used for the election. It's just reckless.
It's really interesting. I think it's definitely got a double-edged sword. For those who do not believe that this is real, that probably encouraged them more that COVID is just the flu. On the other end, you have over 200,000 deaths in America. There'll be merry Americans who will be upset at how reluctant he was to take it as seriously as other nations have.
For sure, and that's not the only basically issue that people have had with Trump's policies, for example. So, for example, a lot of people took a lot of issues to his tax cuts in 2017, which was to the higher earners.
Yeah.
He argued that it would overhaul the US economy, become quote unquote rocket fuel in Trump language, but it's actually just increased the federal deficit to about $1 trillion for 2018.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Trump was supposed to be the president for the economy, and that was his main point that he ran on. So to kind of see him slip back in that, especially as the exit polls kind of showed that the economy was the top issue, you would have thought that Trump's policy failures in that area would have had a bigger impact. But to talk more on his policies, we've got a video discussing Trump in more detail.
Donald Trump is the 45th and current President of the United States. He was born and raised in New York City and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in economics. Before entering politics, he was a businessman and a television personality. He took over his father's real estate business in 1971 and renamed it the Trump Organization, where he expanded its operations to renovating and building skyscrapers, golf courses, casinos, and much more. He also owned the Miss Universe brand of beauty pageants from 1996 to 2015 and produced and hosted the reality television program The Apprentice from 2003 to 2015. Trump entered the 2016 presidential election as a Republican and was elected as president in an electoral college victory. During his presidency, Trump ordered a travel ban on citizens from several Muslim-majority countries. The ban was in place from January 2017 to March 2017. He enacted a tax cut package for individuals and businesses. Trump has retracted the individual health insurance mandate penalty of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, but has failed to repeal and replace the ACA as of yet. In foreign policy, Trump has pursued an American First agenda, withdrawing the US from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade negotiations, the Paris Agreement on climate change, and the Iran nuclear deal.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
He imposed import tariffs which triggered a trade war with China, moved the US embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, and withdrew US troops from northern Syria. Trump met multiple times with Northern Korea leader Kim Jong-un, but talks on denuclearization broke down in 2019. A council investigation found that Trump and his team welcomed and encouraged Russian interference in the 2016 US election, but sufficient evidence wasn't found to press charges of criminal conspiracy with Russia. After getting Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, his political rival, the House of Representatives impeached him in 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. However, the Senate acquitted him for both charges in February 2020. Donald Trump has also been criticised about his handling of the COVID-19 global pandemic. He's been accused of minimising the threat and also promoting false information about treatments and availability of testing. Donald Trump's 2020 campaign is focusing on boosting the economy, jobs, protecting the US trade interests, and tackling immigration. Let's have a look at Trump's stance on the key issues. Donald Trump wants to lower individual corporate taxes, cut regulations, and end trade deficit. He also campaigns for America First principles and has pushed for bringing jobs and manufacturing back to the US. Trump wants to end the reliance on China and protect US manufacturing. Trump wants to reduce illegal immigration and reform the legal immigration system. He hopes to continue the construction of the wall on the US-Mexico border and vows to eliminate the visa lottery and chain migration, as well as shifting to a merit-based entry system. He withdrew from the Paris Agreement and wants to boost fossil fuel development. He's promoted oil, gas, and coal production, and after the wildfires in the summer, Trump predicted that the climate would start getting cooler.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
On coronavirus, Trump wants to keep the economy reopened and prioritise the development of a vaccine. And finally, Trump aims to limit access to abortion, ban transgender troops in the military, and protect the Second Amendment rights.
So that was a profile of Donald Trump right there. One of the most important policies, he's not really policy, but one of the most influential parts of his presidency has been his role on the judiciary, which can come quite handy right now.
Yeah, it would. He seems very confident and very willing to kind of jump to the Supreme Court to help him out if this election becomes one that needs to be contested.
Yeah, well, for example, he's had 3 Supreme Court justices out of the 9. That was Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Coney Barrett. And, well, Coney Barrett was only installed about last month.
Yeah, really controversially. They really pushed her through last minute. But his influence on the judiciary shouldn't be underestimated. It's going to help him a lot if it comes down to the wire on this one.
For sure, like, it's just a lot there. But what we're going to do now is we're going to have a little look at what's going on in the world of social media. We're going to have a little chat with Millie.
So I'm here with our social media presenter, Millie.
Yeah, I've kind of come on to break up the more serious content because I myself personally don't know loads about politics, can't I? Especially American politics, it's quite confusing. So I've been going through Twitter to find some good memes, and there's been loads from like all over the world, more like British people I've seen than there is American. So the first one I've got from Peter Rutten at Aussie Shaker, and it says pretty much sums up the US presidential election in a nutshell. And if you can see that, it's like a Simpson meme, and it's got all the like countries of the world, well not all the countries of the world, around two American chimps fighting, and I think it's very apt for what we're going through at the moment.
Yeah.
Everyone's kind of just watching and treading on eggshells, but I find it quite amusing. The next one I've got is from Burner account at Burner A, and then a load of numbers that I'm not going to read. And it says, I don't understand why Florida and Texas voted for Trump when he doesn't even believe in climate change, and both states being like 2, 3, 5, 5, 4, 5 hurricanes a year. Can't even read that. I'm so lost about that. It's ridiculous, don't you think?
To be fair, it makes no sense.
Yeah. Imagine not believing in climate change.
That's Donald Trump though, isn't
It's
it?
so ridiculous. Such a strange man, and it's got like a little meme of a woman hiding. I just probably should have not got the photos up to share, but they've been amusing me, I can't lie. I've got another one. Maybe this is not as light-hearted as beforehand, and it's from Edward McEwen. And he says, no matter the end result, the fact that so many Americans can come out and vote for Trump after everything we've witnessed for the last 4 years is both heartbreaking and demoralising. It's a broken society, a failed stature. That's quite serious, actually. I came here to do light-hearted content, and that's quite serious.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just projecting my thoughts onto these tweets a bit too much.
Like, a lot of people do feel that way.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just an election, it's people's lives.
Like, so many things have changed in the past 4 years, and like, with the whole coronavirus thing happening, I'm personally just baffled that people are even thinking of voting for him, let alone actually doing it. But I'm not American, so it's not my point. It's not my
That's
opinion.
America,
Literally. And the last one I've got, that's a bit more light-hearted, is from an account called Judge Judy Jr. at Judy Perfect, not Judy Perfect. And it says, the rest of the world watching Americans still support Trump, and it's like the meme that goes, Anna, ooh. And it's so funny, because I've seen so many tweets of like people being like, oh, I'm not even American, I'm terrified, and it's like, so many tweets, it's just everyone else scared for America because it has such a massive impact on us. And
yeah, there's a lot of that this morning.
Yeah, and it's like my Twitter feed's full of it all, like the hashtag election 2020 is just absolutely full of it. But yeah, all the tweets have been very memey and fun. But yeah, that's all my light-hearted stuff. I kind of wanted to break, maybe they weren't too light-hearted, but I wanted to break up the seriousness. But I think we may be going back to Studio One now. I think we are. And they're going to talk about Trump's impeachment.
They are.
Correct?
So.
Oh yeah, let's see what they have to say.
Obviously a big part of his campaign, so it'd be really interesting to see what they've got to say about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So back to Studio.
Thank you, Millie, for that one. I wonder if that was actually from the real Judge Judy Jr.
Oh, who knows with the internet these days? I think Millie made a really good point in the fact that everyone's kind of on edge. It's really an election that can shake up the world, and especially with such an unconventional president as Trump, who knows what can happen for the next 4 years.
That's if he gets it. Well, he says he's got it, but you don't know. Or, I think with Biden as well, especially, he's only going to be there. He's going to be the oldest president, isn't he? So I can only see him being there for 4 years. But talking about being in office, Trump was nearly kicked out of office last year. Think about it. About February was when he got acquitted in the Senate, and that feels like ages ago. It feels like years.
You couldn't imagine a few years ago talking about a president who had been through impeachment trials, then really battling for the presidency in his next term. It's really unprecedented, and it kind of makes you question the reaction of the Americans when they're still strongly supporting Trump despite everything he's been through the last year.
Sure, so what happened was he got accused of pressuring Ukraine for dirt on Biden. I mixed Biden and the son's name together to make Biden. Biden and Hunter, which has kind of come up recently within the past few days, because there's been these things about Hunter Biden's laptop and Chinese money. We don't really know if it's true or not, so we're not going to talk about it. But what we do know is he basically withheld a White House meeting from the Ukrainian president, who's newly elected. He's the one that had his own TV show being the president of Ukraine, then actually became the president of Ukraine, and also $400 million of military aid. And the Democrats basically argued that this was an abuse of power, abuse of the office in terms of personal gain. Yeah. But obviously he impeached in the House where the Democrats controlled it, but in the Senate he was acquitted, and that's quite controversial because some of the kind of more moderate Republicans like Suzanne Collins and Maine, they were quite criticised by their own states, and they nearly, it could have risked them being kicked out of their own state.
Yeah, it was really interesting, especially as it kind of solidified this notion that the Republicans really need Trump to get re-elected, and they were willing to really go down party lines when it came to impeachment of this president. And like you said, it was really controversial for those slightly more liberal Republicans who were risking supporting an impeached president.
For sure, it's just like, I think the last president we had was Bill Clinton. He hasn't been impeached. Richard Nixon was probably getting impeached, but obviously resigned before that. And it is just such a crazy moment in any presidency. But just like COVID-19, I think I was listening to John Bolton, who was his former national security advisor. They argue that impeachment emboldened him, like it emboldened him on COVID-19. And because he got let off, he thought, this is fine.
Yeah, he really solidified his support with. There was a really understated reaction to such a massive event in American politics. And you have to question, are Republicans fearful of stepping out of line with Trump on big issues? Smaller issues you could debate, you could go back and forth on, but impeachment is a really big one to stand by a president by. So we have to kind of see, with such a quick news cycle as well, how impactful was this impeachment to Trump, if anything, especially when we're looking at an election that is so close right now?
And I think the other important point is, if it does turn out that Trump is elected president and the Democrats have control of Congress, he'll probably get impeached again, wouldn't he?
Oh, without a doubt. He's got 4 years, really, to go through another round of investigations, and with Congress on the Democratic side, it'd be a lot easier to push that impeachment through.
For sure. But then, do they really want Mike Pence as president? Is he, he's obviously got a lot of controversial views on gay rights, on abortion. As bad as Donald Trump is, do they kind of feel like we don't want to replace one evil with just the same evil again?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's this tactical side of politics that we kind of see stick more to elections when we're talking about tactical voting, things like that, shifting now to talking about an impeachment of a president and how the country wants to move forward with its next leader. Of course, that would be Mike Pence. But he is slightly more conservative than Trump on some issues, and it'd be interesting to see if the Democrats want to risk that.
Yeah, like I've read somewhere that he's, the most conservative vice president in the past 40 years. But talking of vice presidents, Joe Biden was one of them once. Let's have a look profile of his life.
Joe Biden's probably best known for being the 47th Vice President of the United States. He served between 2009 and 2017 under the Obama administration. Born the 20th of November 1942, Biden grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He graduated from the University of Delaware with a double major in political science and history and a minor in English. He also then went to the Syracuse University College of Law, where he earned a law degree. Before politics, Biden worked in a law firm as a public defender. Then in 1972, he was elected the Democratic County Council seat for Delaware. However, sadly that year, he also lost his wife and one-year-old daughter in a tragic automobile accident. However, in 1973, Biden was elected Senator of the United States. Age 30, he was the 6th youngest senator in US history. As Senate, he focused on consumer issues, environmental issues, and greater government accountability. During his time as Senate, Biden was a long-time member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and eventually its chairman. He played a key role in several foreign policy matters. He supported the resolution authorizing the Iraq War in 2002, but did oppose the surge of US troops in 2007, and also chaired the Senate Judiciary Committee from 1987 to 1995. He was re-elected to the Senate 6 times and was the 4th most senior senator before resigning to become Obama's vice president in 2009. In terms of presidency, Biden stood for the 1988 Democratic election, however eventually faded away due to plagiarizing other politicians' speeches and making false claims about his personal life. Biden also ran for president in 2008, focused on his foreign policy knowledge in relation to that of Obama's. However, he had difficulty raising funds, he failed to get people to his rallies, and failed to gain any sort of traction. But in August 2008, Obama announced Biden as his running mate for vice president, and was re-elected senator, meaning he was the youngest ever senator to start a 7th full term. As vice president, Biden oversaw various different legislations, including Infrastructure spending in 2009 to counteract the Great Recession, 2010 Tax Relief Act, Budget Control Act of 2011, Taxpayer Relief Act of 2012, and the United States-Russia New START Treaty. After being re-elected as vice president in 2012, Biden continued to push for policy change, including the Violence Against Women Act and more legislation towards arms control. After declining to run for presidency in 2016, Obama awarded Biden the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction in January 2017. In April 2019, he announced his candidacy in the 2020 US election. This was strongly influenced by his negative views towards Donald Trump. On August 11, 2020, Biden announced Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate for vice president. This made her the first African American and the first South Asian American to appear as a vice presidential nominee on a major party ticket. Biden's slogan is to build America back better. Biden focuses on boosting the economy and jobs, giving every American affordable healthcare, rewarding work over wealth, providing stronger support for immigrants, and fixing Donald Trump's COVID-19 fiasco. Now let's take a look at Biden's policies further. To beat COVID-19, Biden stands by that we need to listen to science and ensure public health is informed by public health professionals. To restore trust and transparency, Biden has a 7-step process. Fix Trump's test and trace fiasco, fix PPE problems, provide clear guidance and resources, plan for effective vaccines, protect older and high-risk Americans, rebuild defences which Trump dismantled, and implement mask mandates. Biden has an economic recovery plan for working families. Whereas Trump rewarded wealth over work, Biden plans to create millions of good-paying jobs and give American working families the tools, choices and freedoms they need to build back better. He wants to provide immediate relief for working families, small businesses and communities, and plans to mobilise America to ensure the future is America, with modern infrastructure, talented workforce, racial equality, and help for both students and women. Biden wants to give every American affordable healthcare and health insurance and reward health over wealth. He wants to stop the reversal of progress made by Obamacare to make sure 100 million people aren't worrying about insurance companies charging high premiums. Whereas Trump prioritises large corporations and the wealthy, Biden wants to make the wealthy pay their fair share and provide tax relief for working families. He will not raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000. For the climate, Biden proposes a clean energy revolution to address the grave threat and lead the world in addressing this climate emergency. He ensures the US will achieve a 100% clean energy economy and reach net zero emissions no later than 2050. Whereas Trump's waged an unrelenting assault on American values and history as a nation of immigrants, Biden wants to modernise immigration and have a fair and humane system through changing rules on visas. He also wants to undo Trump's administration that separates parents from children at the border and end his detrimental asylum policies.
So that was a little profile at Joe Biden. Then he was the 46th Vice President of the United States.
Yes, I believe that's true. It's really interesting, obviously having a Vice President running for president now, you think perfect person given all his experience, but it seems to have kind of hurt him as this drain the swamp narrative has kind of spread across America, and there's a high levels of distrust in Washington at the moment.
Oh, for sure. Well, actually, I'll tell you that he was the 47th.
47th, we were
47th. It kind of, yeah, and you think he'd be such a strong, candidate. He can obviously mobilise some of the African American vote that Hillary Clinton struggled with his association with Barack Obama. He really helped with kind of, the automotive industry coming out of the Rust Belt.
Yeah, definitely. He thought he'd be a much more confident candidate, and people trust him more purely for the fact that he is a known figure. But we're gonna pop across to our for the final time to hear what's going on in social media.
Okay, so now we want to talk about how much money's been spent in this election.
A lot of money. I think they kind of doubled from last time.
Is it like $11 billion?
And that's
how much could you do with $11 billion?
I've never had that kind of money to think about that, but probably for a campaign, you would think they wouldn't need to spend that much money if they're kind of always campaigning on Twitter.
Seems a bit of a waste in a way.
True. Especially with all the tweets of Mr. Trump. I mean, he's always just literally tweeting away.
Yeah. They do a lot of social media and that kind of stuff. You wouldn't have thought it's needed.
Yeah.
And also, most people know who they're going to vote for anyway.
Yeah.
So
it seems a bit of a waste. I keep seeing people saying on Twitter how they get the wrong adverts on Instagram. Someone's voting for Trump and they're getting a Biden ad, and then someone's voting for Biden and they're getting a Trump ad, and they're like, I'm not gonna vote for this other person. So, but they still get the adverts. So maybe that money's kind of going to waste.
Yeah.
If people know what they're
The
voting.
other thing a lot of money gets spent on is TV adverts as well. So if you're in a swing state, then you'll see a lot of adverts. Most of the adverts this time of year are Trump or Biden ones, because I know that's how they were kind of predicting the election in a way, because they were talking about how Biden was putting TV ads on in Texas, which is really Republican.
Oof.
So that's how they could, how people thought he might win there. That was one of the reasons. But obviously,
I don't think that's where. Not really sure about the result.
He lost it, and then overall tonight it's not great, is it?
For the money is spent, seems like not really well spent. I feel like another weird thing as well is back on one of his rallies, Trump was throwing masks at the audience. I'm pretty sure that must have been money used from the campaign to buy the masks, but then he's throwing them at the audience and they're kind of falling to the ground, so kind of the purpose is defeated there from the mask. Kind of not really hygienic.
That's Trump.
Yeah.
Did you see his advert that went out yesterday of him dancing the YMCA?
No way.
Yeah.
Did he?
So he does it at all of his rallies.
Oh,
They put
I
out.
I thought it only happened once at one of the rallies. He's kind of recycling that now.
Oh yeah, he does it a lot.
Oh, he's using the meme.
So there's it's weird. That's all I can say.
He's using the meme, recycling, and so a lot of funny stuff from this kind of very serious.
Such a weird campaign, isn't it? And spending money on showing Trump dancing, it just makes no sense. But that's America.
So after this bit of a light-hearted break, we're back to Studio One with the latest. Hopefully.
So for the last time, that was Studio 2 for today's coverage, and it's been 3 hours of not much, but just kind of confusion of what's happened overnight.
Yeah, it's been a big election, and despite not much changing whilst we've been on air, it's hugely significant, the results we have got.
So currently we're standing at 238 electoral college votes for Joe Biden. And his route to power is looking like it's going to have to come through Pennsylvania. Seems to be a really important one for him. Obviously, Joe Biden's birth state.
Yeah.
It just seems like if he doesn't win Pennsylvania, he's lost the election.
Yeah, it's really unusual, especially for a birth state. Usually candidates have quite a lot of support from there, but he just doesn't seem to get in that traction. It's going to be really interesting to watch the next couple of days to see if he can claw back those votes in Pennsylvania. But like we said, it's all about mail-in ballots at the moment, especially as they are leaning so heavily in Biden's favour.
For sure. So Pennsylvania currently, according to the Associated Press, they've got 64% of the vote recorded. It looks like 55.7% to Trump and 43.1% to Biden. But as we say, that is not even 2/3 of the vote counted.
Yeah,
so a lot can change. So obviously, we've probably got another, quick maths, another 2 million votes to be counted from the 2-3 million votes to be added on. And obviously another important one would be Michigan, which is slightly in Trump's favour.
Yeah.
16 electoral college votes there. Do you think he can swing it? Obviously Trump won it last time. Can he swing it back?
I mean, considering that he did win it last time, it's going to be a really hard slog for Biden. And it's quite unusual that we're talking about so many votes still waiting to be counted, and how controversial Trump's statements were in his speech, kind of claiming that victory so early on, with millions of votes still yet to come in.
For sure, like Nevada is pretty much leaning to Biden right now. That's got 67% reported. Looks like a point difference between the two of them, but that's a really crucial state for Joe Biden. That's 6 electoral college votes that Clinton won last time, and obviously Wisconsin as well. That's got 10, 95% reported, so it's nearly there, but 48.9 for Trump, 49.6 for Biden. It is extremely close. I think there is only 21,000 votes within it.
No, it kind of reflects that 2000 election with Bush and Al Gore, with how close it's going to get in the final stages of this election. It's really quite unusual for any presidential election to be that tight, and it's going to be exciting watching for everyone, keeping up to date with the American election.
For sure. So we've just got Georgia and North Carolina to go. They're leading, but currently handing 238 to Joe Biden, 213 to Donald Trump. The House is looking like it's back with an increased majority, according to the Associated Press, to the Democrats, and the Senate is split 45-47, but obviously 2 of them senators, including Bernie Sanders, sit with the Democrats.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot. But this show has been a massive undertaking because we're currently dealing with coronavirus. We're about to go into lockdown tonight, and we didn't even think we could do this tonight. So I've got a list of thank yous, basically, because everyone has put in such an effort in today, and it has just been such a slog. So in Studio 1 today, you had obviously Lucy, Alice, Adam, and Casey. In Studio 2, you had Kasha, Hannah, Charlie, Medina, Tom, and Nira. In the gallery, you've had Ben, George, and Karen on the Vision Mix. George and Lucy have been in charge of our broadcast control. Adam, Lucy, and George have also directed the show, while Eliza, Mary, and Murto as well have been floor managing in Studio 1. Charlie and Hannah have also been quite important in Studio 2 as well. In terms of researchers, making sure we're keeping up to date with everyone, and also making sure we don't miss any of these important electoral college seats, even though we've had none, was obviously Alice, Casey, and Medina. And if you're watching on Twitter, you've obviously seen a few of our highlights. That was Edward, Millie, and Charlie in charge of that. And obviously you're seeing all these wonderful stats coming in, powered by the Associated Press. That was thanks to Lizzie and George. They've actually got a full-time job, and they're still doing this. I forgot a few more presenters as well. There was Ellie, Franks, and Millie, who's a part of the social media team. And even though we've had a few funny issues throughout the thing with audio, Joanna basically made sure Studio 2 went live and this studio went live. So, everyone's been a part of it. Thank you. It has been such a big undertaking.
It's been huge, and thank you to you.
That's fine. That's fine. But it's been so exciting. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. You can keep up to date with us if you want, but who knows what's going to happen this election. So thank you so much for watching, and
stay safe.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.